but I can't read, I can't write, I can't spell, and most of the time I don't know my left from my right.
Now here's the thing about me that's a secret that most people don't know. I'm borderline retarded, and I can't read. These books that you're recommending, Goethe. I would pick that up and I would be like, 10 minutes later, I'd be like, what's my favorite song? The ABCs?
I think we're kind of getting off topic. Can you name 10 books?
Keep going back to me. Can you?
No, don't change.
No.
10 books.
You're changing the subject, actually.
10 books.
You're changing the subject,
okay,
actually.
3 books.
Okay. Well, the Game of Thrones series,
not a book.
Twilight series. It is a book.
Dress your age. Carrying a school bag on stage. What you do with a school bag on stage? You can't even read.
Oh boy, how's it going? Prude, it's good to be with you again.
Oh, it's so good to be back doing this wonderful show where we read so you guys don't have to.
We were trying to end reading. I don't want to hear it.
We are anti-literacy. We're anti-media literacy. We're just anti-literate, period. This is the most anti-literate show you will ever find online. And I think it's really funny. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago as we were planning out what the hell we were going to talk about for the next couple of weeks was that we are doing Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, of all people. If you ever reply to him with a certain photo of him next to Jeffrey Epstein, he will block you. If you quote tweet him making fun of an old tweet from 2011 like I did, you will get blocked by him. Just letting you know. But no,
look at this guy. Look
at this
this
guy. Look at this dude.
I'm going to say this. He's got the physiognomy of a man who couldn't be anything other than a professor. I can't imagine this head, this face, doing anything else other than like standing in front of a giant chalkboard. Look at him. He's got academic written all over him.
Oh, I was going to say nonce, but yeah, that works too.
Yeah, he could also be a gay pedophile.
So I thought it was funny that we're covering Enlightenment Now on bright and holy Monday. This is the day after Easter. This is the day after Pascha. So I feel like we have to say a few things before we get started. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tomb is bestowing life. Sorry, Mr. Pinker. It's true. It happened. It's the most important thing that's ever happened. And we're covering Pinker. Just what has it been? It's been less than 24 hours since Pope Francis proposed.
Well, that's a good point, and it's very timely that you brought that up because that is going to tie into something we discuss later in this book in a very, I'd say, anti-religious bent that he has. And, I don't know how much you want to discuss the death of Pope Francis or how many Catholics are in the audience, but the wound is still fresh, and there's a lot of debate on how appropriately to react to this, and people are already arguing about who the next pope's going to be. It's become very politicized, very ideological. But I guess, what are your feelings on all this? Does it cast a pall over the stream? The most important question.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I really don't think about the Catholic Church all that much. So no, it doesn't particularly for me. In the sense that I know it's going to be. I think a friend of ours, I think it was Popehead or someone, had said it best on Twitter, where he's just like, "I'm now going to hear every Catholic convert take on who the next Pope should be for the next 3 months, and it's going to be insufferable."
We get to play out whatever film, Conclave or the Young Pope. We get to reference all this stuff. Who's the cool Pope? Who is the most, West-coded Pope? And let's debate about whether or not the Black Pope is allowed. What if he's a Black Pope, but he does enough scary things? Does that make him cool? Good question. Not a question for this stream, but a question worth hashing out in the economy of takes.
Well, while we are anti-literacy, we are pro-ho scaring. So, I'm fine with whatever direction gets us there.
We got FBI informant here saying he's not a fan of Pinker. I mean, this guy was a real jerk. I guess that's what I was trying to get at with this book, because we always joke behind the scenes.
I thought it was his associations with a well-known, established, intelligent, asset and pedophile at Jeffrey Epstein that was the real bad part about him.
I hope that's what he's known for one day. That he just Streisand affects that until he was was it Epstein's friend?
No way.
That's secular Epstein's friend.
Secular humanist Jeffrey Epstein.
But Famed secular humanist Jeffrey Epstein. But we joke behind the scenes that there's one for us and one for them. One episode, one stream where we cover a type of book, and you would think that the one for the people would be, you know, something that like this, but no, this is one for us. Like when we did White Fragility, because I am in the mood to be upset. I love these types of books because I probably wouldn't read them on my own for our show, Blood Salad. I don't know if you would ever cover it on Prudent Observations, but it's like it's important to understand where we are culturally, politically, metaphysically, but no one ever just reads this dog shit. No one reads like the anti-white literature, but with this show, we get a chance to really dive deep into it and treat it seriously and pick it apart. This one's an interesting one because I think you came to the same conclusion as me, is there's almost nothing redeemable about it. I did not enjoy this book very much, and it's long. It's I think over 500 pages, 500 and change. It's pretty exhaustive. I don't know how his other books stack up, but if you've ever wanted to hear just a full-throated defense of secular humanism, and almost, I would describe it as the next step from Francis Fukuyama's The End of History. Whereas the end of history might be even more interesting, but Steven Pinker says, no, we are at the end of history, and that's great. And then let's talk about why it's great, written in a very kind of non-interesting way. What do you think?
I was really thinking about, I want to say, Carl Sagan's got that book about like demons in the darkness. I think that this book is the logical conclusion or the next step from that text, or maybe it's from Dawkins. I really don't remember. I haven't read it in a long time. And you had said something, I think it was in one of our Twitter GCs or even on Telegram, where you had said something along the lines of, I wouldn't normally cover this book, but it's good to kind of get a baseline for sort of liberal, secular, humanist ideology. Because, I mean, our realities are so bifurcated. If anyone has ever taken the time to go on Blue Sky for 5 minutes and look up Trump or anything remotely political, they live in a totally different world that we do. And it's this sort of parapolitical, paranoid schizophrenia that everything is going to come in, that it's 1933 or we're getting really close to that. And, you know, now we've got political scientists at like GMU, and I think this is a fun little tie into all this, where they're just like, well, actually, the only solution to all political problems is violence. And if you want to put your little mold bug hat on, you're like, this is a really great case of formalism. But, I mean,
the mold bug hat, of course, being a yarmulke.
Of course. You know,
the mold bug wig and yarmulke.
The mold bug wig, but then it has a little yarmulke on top, and it has a little card of the Communist Party of the United States you put in your little shirt pocket to talk about how cool your parents were. But no, I say all that because it's funny to watch this book come out, because this book was published in 2018. So this is a first-term Trump book where it's talking about how actually, in the midst of everyone telling you how bad things are, the world on a macro scale, we're talking about globally here, things have gotten actually really good. Poverty is down, world hunger is down, we've sort of escaped the Malthusian trap, and here's all the reasons why, like metaphysically, the Enlightenment has produced the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people on a case-by-case basis on everything from ecology to economics to crime, etc. And some cherry picking, of course, is involved. We'll get into it in a second. But it's an interesting little leap back in time to when there was this more, it's literally like the last sort of writing polemic that you'll find from like the New Atheist days, where there's this very white progressive universality that's being applied to the world, while the rest of the world, left wing and right wing, or whatever terms you want to use, really just are like, actually, these like nice political formulas are pretty placating illusions, when things like race is real, politics is about divvying up things on a resource scarcity basis, and turns out you can't really save everybody, and the world, in fact, is getting worse. Contrary to some of the arguments that are going to get claimed in here, And the only thing that I got out of this book was some of the citations that he cites. There's a book that he cites a lot called The Idea of Western Decline, which tracks the history of doomsday predictions and arguments and polemics about the decline of the West. A popular book title for some of us around here in these parts.
It's sort of like begging the question too, where it's like I wrote a book asking the question, why do people think that the West is declining? Already implying that it's not, and you start off by saying it's a delusion, which is really taken to heart in this book. Because as Prude just said, if I just summarize this book in one phrase, it reminds me of that old kind of tired Louis C.K. bit where it's like everything's amazing and nobody's happy. So I actually just want to call attention to a comment here. Where the fuck was it? It was about the end of history. Someone asking whether here it is. Javier Olivia says, doesn't the end of history imply the beginning of something else, or is that my public school education kicking in? A very good question, and I'm glad you asked that at the start because I mentioned it, and it's probably going to come up. So I read Fukuyama's The End of History and The Last Man quite some time ago, covered it on the show, but there actually is the specter of something correct in there by saying that by the 20th century, we have basically exited history, or in other words, we've exited the paradigm that governed most of human history. We've solved it. We're at the precipice of a post-scarcity society with individualism, with democracy, with secularism. We can completely leave behind all of the forces and phenomena that governed human affairs before, and we can chart a course and forward. And really, we don't even need to record history anymore because we're in a perfect state or something approaching a perfect state. And I don't believe that to be true. However, there's a I hate to say the word vibe, but there is sort of a sense in there that we have reached a historical terminus of something. And you could say post-industrial revolution or at the birth of the information age. There is this sense that everything is different and nothing can go back to the way it was psychologically, emotionally, biologically. We seem to be on sort of a Kurzweil curve, whether or not you believe in Ray Kurzweil's singularity of technological progress. But it does seem that we're accelerating towards something, and people really intuit that when they look at the culture. So we kind of understand that the historical forces that would have driven us previously, they don't really account for much anymore. It's something new, for better or worse. So I think these guys look at that and say, oh, that just means everything's perfect. We can live in a world without war anymore. Whereas the pessimists or the realists might say, or this is the dawn of the most mind-bending, earth-shattering war you could ever imagine. Like, there's no reason to be this optimistic because, again, we return to the question Pinker asks, everything is amazing. Why is everybody miserable? Because he admits nobody's happy. He admits that nobody, aside from him and his cohorts, believe that the world is perfect, or it's the most perfect it's ever been. So that's kind of in my view, what the book is trying to answer. So the book is written almost confrontationally in that sense. Like he's trying to address people who already think the book is bullshit, and so he's trying to prove you, the reader, wrong. So it's not even like it's putting forward a positive vision, but it's in a hostile way. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't like it though.
Yeah, it's very much finger wagging. It's like it's to be terribly, not to say. I'm reminded of that terrible quip that gets pointed out all the time from like Rick and Morty. It's like, you're both wrong and I can prove it mathematically. And he's just like, I can prove that you're wrong, Chud, and I've got a list of 20 citations as to why. And that's really what this book does for me, is that it's a case-by-case basis of this guy lamenting, I just wish everyone was so much smarter so they could be on my level and understand that the world is actually in a really good place, and that these idiots from all sides, these left-wingers who hate nuclear energy, these Christians, these Republicans, they're all dumb and retarded, and if you were with me, then you would understand that actually the world is doing really good right now. And it's just this very condescending tone. And then you start reading through it, and you go through everything that our side of things has been talking about for like the last 20, 30 years about that the Flynn effect is not actually continuing, and that we are seeing sort of a stop to it. Parts of IQs are going down, and in both America and other parts of the West, that we're seeing income inequality continue to be driven up by various factors that he doesn't really talk about. Immigration. He does not talk about human biodiversity at all. Although he does talk about race science and how terrible that is, despite the fact that he acknowledges that human biodiversity is real in a one offhand citation. And that, we actually have to look forward to the fact that the thinkers of the Enlightenment brought upon this great era of mercy, scientific exploration, and calculation. It's if you put our atheism through Grok and just said, write me a book based on these two things, and this is what you would get out of it, is give me a case to prove that the world is actually doing just fine.
I also love that you mentioned Rick and Morty, because when you think of who this book is for, or someone you might know who would parrot these points, I just think of Neil deGrasse Tyson as sort of the archetype of the fan of this book. I saw a tweet by him earlier. He's like, I've given a lot of thought during this Easter about Christ, and I think it's very telling that if Christ, a brown man, existed now, they would be fighting to deport him. You know what I mean? Like, he's got that take of, oh, my science. He says, oh, my science. I'm not a Christian. I have nothing but contempt for Christ, but I think if he existed, he would be a Democrat and subscribe to me. Just that type of guy. So Steven Pinker I detected in this book the strongest hostility towards religion, and he just thinks it's stupid. And he thinks, I believe he outright says this in the book, that science could rise to the occasion of replacing organized religion. Well, why can't it? It's just magic. Like, it is a Rick and Morty understanding of science. It's magic. It can do anything. It can be God. We can make a machine God. We can make an AI machine God, and that makes us obsolete. But maybe we deserve it because we believe in racism. Oh, no, meow.
Racism. Oh. Although it is particularly interesting, because he's written other books in the past, The Blank Slate. I think he also wrote The Better Angels of Our Nature. That's definitely one of his books. And so when you go through this, and I mean, 699 pages, but believe it or not, it is a very fast read. This is probably at the highest, maybe a 7th grade reading level. And he'll just be like, well, if you point to this graph, you can see my point. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If we look at this next graph, we can see my point. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, it reads like a very robust Reddit post.
Well,
like,
it reads like a middle school essay. Like, this is my thesis, and these are my contributing points. And at the end of the chapter, you will see my conclusion about why my enemies are retarded. And so that's...
No, but basically, it's like, oh, you think people are sad right now? Well, look at this graph that says people are happy. Look at that curve going up exponentially.
Look at that line go up.
They've been, and it starts in like 1750, and it's going like, wait, what were you were taking a census on happiness in 1750? Where? In America? Like, what? Hold on a second. What is this graph, you asshole? You fucking piece of shit with a phenomenal hairline. I grant you that. I grant you.
That doesn't sound jealous at all there, Dimes.
No, he's got the hairline that if I do everything right, I can maintain into that age. And he does not have a fro. He's got a flow. And that's where a lot of people are getting tripped up. They say, oh, he's got a big Jew fro. No, that's just what people with really fantastic hairlines, you have to grow it at that age. That's all you can do. Because any day can fall out. Any day, heart attack. Any day, stroke. Any day, your balls explode. But at the very least, you got that. You can maybe the hair's gone tomorrow. Maybe your head falls off. Maybe a fucking black hole opens up inside of your solar anus. I don't know what I'm saying. Save me, Prude.
It's so again, why I think this book is also one of those last vestiges of new atheism is that it spends a long time talking about Islam towards the end. Because this book is divided into 3 sections, mind you. And the 3 sections of this text are Enlightenment, Progress, and then Reason, Science, and Humanism. And in part 3 is where you really get a lot of his political leanings that just really come out. I mean, it's throughout all the book, but I mean, he just lets white middle America have it. But he spends a long time on Islam, in part because he really does think that the same sort of belief that Dawkins and others had, probably with the exception of Hitchens, that, you know, we are liberalizing the world faster than, you know, Islam can try and like repress it. And it's always been interesting if that's true, and per his evidence, he's saying that it's true, then that makes liberalism the greatest weapon ever devised by mankind that's been unleashed ideologically speaking. When you can stand there with like your little soy face with the my brother in science kind of deal, and you can tell me that, like, actually, I can make the imam's son trans before he can bomb me with his car. That's a terrifying realization of what kind of weapon we've unleashed upon the world.
That's a great way to contextualize this, viewing liberalism as a degenerative force, but being happy about that. Because this throws back to a time, maybe some of the younger viewers won't remember this, but this would be sort of the alt-right, alt-light, 1.0 era, but where anti-Islam and anti-Islamist sentiment was very popular on the right. I mean, it still is, obviously, but I remember even from guys like Gavin McInnes, you hate Muslims, but what do Muslims really hate? Men kissing. And so the great protest Gavin McInnes enacted against some fucking...
like the Dutch nationalist parties that have gay pride parades in like Muslim neighborhoods.
Yeah. Gavin McInnes like made out with Milo Yiannopoulos in front of like some Muslim thing, some mosque. And you're supposed to say, yay, get them. That's how we defeat Islam. Using...
So the other thing too that I laugh about this, and I mentioned it earlier, is there's no acknowledgement of race at all in this, other than talking about how awful racism is, and that we have this explosive exponential growth of anti-discrimination laws throughout the world. And so, it's towards the end where he's talking about like, calling out the anti-humanistic features of contemporary Islamic belief is in no way Islamophobic or civilization clashing. Contradiction in terms. To call out anything that you would consider anti-human is a clash of civilization. I'm sorry. I know that you hate that wonderful book, The Clash of Civilizations, Mr. Pinker, but it's a really good book that you should read. He says criticizing Islam is no more bigoted than criticizing the ideas of neoliberalism or the Republican Party platform. And again, you could only say this pre 9/11 or with a pre 9/11 mindset, where it's just because new atheism kind of had to break, where they were like, either atheism can be a weapon against Islam, and you're going to see that with like the late Chris Hitchens, where he was just like, actually, we should bomb these fuckers back to the Stone Age and wipe out Islam, and he's doing it in this sort of like liberal, neoliberal, atheistic way of doing so, back when he was still alive. Or you have sort of the religious right perspective about Gog and Magog or whatever, but like. When you read this entire section that he's got about Islam, he's like, well, can Islam have an enlightenment? Many faithophilic, the words that he's made up. Like, he's got a great word at the beginning of this book called progressophobia. Like, you're just afraid of progress. And it's just like, there's progress, but then there's also like things that destroy the soul and my civilization.
Well, just two things to say. First, I need to call attention to this comment right here from Credible Threat. End of history, beginning of herstory. No notes. Love it.
That's so good. And there's actually, I think I shared this study in chat earlier, and I had to laugh about it because it was talking about how our language has changed, major shifts in language and diction. And it's using how our cognition has changed from being instead of like deductive and logical, it's actually become intuitive and emotional that are more associated with female traits. So like towards the end of the 19th century, beginning towards the 20th, language shifts academically, politically, in media to a far more intuitive intonation. And it's tracked with us becoming like a softer, more emotion, gut-based society than anything that we can do with like facts, reason, just like plain observation.
Absolutely.
About the world.
Two examples of that. One, it's the popularization of the word vibes. I try and rebel against that however I can. Just the vibe is sort of like a sixth spidey sense of the tone shifting. You don't really know.
It's just investor talk for I can say faggot again.
Yeah, but a man would just
the
say
vibe
that.
shift. No, you mean you're in an environment where you can engage in regulatory capture now that your guy is in office. Moving on.
And also, one thing I noticed, and I caught myself doing this years ago, was the prevalence of men, especially women, yes, but men especially saying, "I feel like," the phrase "I feel like," and then saying the thing you want to say. And I've caught myself doing that. I need to
feel like that's problematic times.
Well, but I feel like, and you could even be saying something masculine, but it's preceded by "I feel like," just to soften it or just to distance yourself from your own point, which is what women do when they're trying to build consensus. They want to say something, but they offload it on the group. It's like, well, how are we feeling? How do we feel about doing this? What do we think about this? Versus just saying a fucking thing. But that's limiting your own accountability to your own opinion and your thoughts. So anyway, I'm including myself in this. Like sometimes it just happens. You don't even notice it. But I've had to really hammer that out of my fucking brain. I need to be more insane and less reasonable is essentially what I'm saying.
So
I think men should be fighting with their wives more. They should be burning more bridges. They should be out in the street, just screaming at birds. Be revolt against the modern world, revolt against whatever. We used to have meaningless revolts. What's the purpose in life? I just want a purposeless fight. More of that. Prue just lets me go. That's the danger.
I love it. That's what I'm here for.
He wants to see a man drowning. We got to get to this fucking book. We're already like
we really should. But I mean, this is the fun part about it is because while he's talking about Islam as this enlightenment thing, he also just sucks off Islam, really just to own the Christians. Where he's just like, well, ancient Islam was a hotbed of all kinds of philosophy and science, and now it's just gotten so backwards, and it's such a shame. And isn't it so sad that we live in the West where we have people like H.L. Mencken and Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's so sad. Like, look at all these people like W.H. Auden or Albert Camus or Yukio Mishima. I just want to cry, and I'm just like, I think I'm done. Actually,
imagine him like Jordan Peterson crying while writing the book. That'd be so fucking funny.
Oh, it would be so good. It would be so good. I'm sure he did at some point. That like he was just crying, but the more he cries as he writes it, the harder he gets, and it's just like now I don't know what to feel, and it's terrifying because you just know underneath like the floorboards, there's probably like some poor child locked up, and they're begging to go home.
See, I'm letting you. Now you're in it. Now you're in a death spiral.
Well, really, the death spiral was reading this fucking book. Like, I'm glad that I read it because this is an understanding of how sort of these like rationalist, academic, enlightenment types think. And I want to keep something in mind is that there was a book I've recently covered, and it'll be out live on my channel this Wednesday. And it's called Revolution, Rebellion in the Early Modern World, Population Change and State Breakdown in England, France, Turkey, China, 1600 to 1850 by Jack A. Goldstone. Now, this book is amazing because it really doesn't talk about, it talks about the Enlightenment, but so many of the factors that we kind of associate with the Enlightenment, we really just, there's this really popular trend, like everyone from frickin' Charles Haywood in his book reviews to a lot of guys, they use the Enlightenment or they use liberalism as a very big catch-all phrase for a thing I don't like, without necessarily tracing some of the intellectual K-lines as to what we're talking about specifically. Are we talking about tranniedom? Are we talking about like democracy? Are we talking about these ideas that certain people's lives matter? Like these are like,
also, it gets even worse when you talk to leftists because to them, liberalism becomes neoliberalism, and neoliberalism is just fascism, and so anything could go in that bucket.
Yeah, and it just becomes something I don't like, and then it becomes a catch-all cover term for I don't want to do the work tracing the intellectual root of these ideas or the pressures for why this belief system gets really popular. And so in Goldstone's book, and I don't want to give away our whole conversation I had with Zoomer Schopenhauer this Wednesday, but a lot of the pressures came from poor famine, terrible financial mismanagement on behalf of the king, but also an exceeding rural population. Like there were more males that were living into their 30s and 40s and were not dying young, and they had nowhere to go but the cities to gain what they called these intriest upper mobile jobs. And so, we talk about this like excessive elites or these midwits or whatever. Well, we're talking about during the prelude of the French Revolution, all these like rural guys that wanted to get an education and nowhere to go, had no marriage prospects, became lawyers, became radicals. And they were, talking about these ideas because they were out of meaningful avenues to, get a living, get a job, get a wife, or gain a title that had some essence of nobility that would allow them to do so. And as nobility becomes this less coveted thing, you're getting an outcrop and a gatekeeping of elite positions. You're getting a lot of quote unquote sensitive young men getting ready to just like off with the head of the king. We're fucking done because there's nothing for us to do. And so like it's kind of a materialist breakdown of the text, but those things are very important for us to consider. Why do these things happen for state breakdown? Whereas in this book, it's almost the opposite. Here are all these material reasons for why life is good, and we have to thank all these like highbrow Enlightenment thinkers for allowing these rational reason beyond the shackles of like Judeo-Christianity or whatever that allow us to escape it. And actually, he doesn't even say that word Judeo-Christian in this entire book at all. He spends the God of the Hebrew Bible, or then he's like, well, then these terrible Christians and their idea about like God and three persons being one. He makes it very clear who his axe to grind is, and it's primarily against Christianity. But he doesn't do a lot of the legwork either. He cites all these philosophers, but he doesn't really cite how those philosophers influence, say, the guys in the university or the academia thing. And he doesn't really give a lot of credit to some of the earliest discoveries of our large scientific advancements in the Renaissance coming from churches and religious orders.
Yeah, and he would say that we succeeded despite that, because within this model, they're always suppressive. They're always repressive. And his view of the scientist is more in line with when I read Asimov's The Foundation series, especially the first book, the way they were describing the scientists as a higher caste of humanity. They're just better than all of us, and they're smarter than all of us, and they're more human than all of us. And all they want to do is make a perfect world. And the only people who get in their way is everybody who's not a scientist. So that's how the entire series is set up. Like, we made a planet of just scientists, and they kind of rule from there. They can actually predict the future, and they're benevolent, right? And that, I believe, is how a lot of these guys, especially the older guys, they approach scientists. They're the only ones. And it is a spiritual thing to them. And it is a philosophical thing to them, because I truly believe they think that only scientists can be humane. And that's where he comes to this idea of secular humanism. Secular humanism as the new faith, as the end of history religion. It's the only one that's capable of an unbiased flourishing for humanity. And that's actually what he gets into here. I'll just read this right off the top. He's quoting himself in the book, of course. He says, as a sentient being, you have the potential to flourish. You can refine your faculty of reason itself by learning and debating. You can seek expectations in the natural world through science and insight in the human condition through arts and humanities. You can make the most of your capacity for pleasure and satisfaction, which allowed your ancestors to thrive and thereby allowed you to exist. You can appreciate the beauty and richness of the natural and cultural world. As the heir to billions of years of life perpetuating itself, you can perpetuate life in turn. You've been endowed with a sense of sympathy. Sympathy is important. I'm taking a brief detour here. Sympathy and empathy, but specifically sympathy, sits at the heart of secular humanism. And I think in his frame, liberalism, that is what makes liberalism special, the centering of sympathy. Anyway, moving on. The ability to like, love, respect, help, and show kindness. And you can enjoy the gift of mutual benevolence with friends, family, and colleagues. And because reason tells you that none of this is particular to you, you have the responsibility to provide to others what you expect for yourself. The Enlightenment principle that we can apply reason and sympathy to enhance human flourishing may seem obvious, trite, old-fashioned. I wrote this book because I have come to realize that it is not. So I think that's a good way to encapsulate. He'll expound upon this in a bit, but he gets there, like the sort of the practical political end of what he is proposing, which is that you center sympathy you seek out your own pleasure, and your duty is to maximize the pleasure and freedom in others, and that's it. And he seems to localize it to the friends and family, but I think, ideologically he expands that to all of humanity, except those unfortunate ones who have not been blessed with individualism, which he thinks is just a matter of time. That's something I wanted to get to earlier when we were talking about Islam, right?
He also talks about it in the whole section on the Flynn effect. He's just like, look at all how global IQ is rising. Like eventually everyone will just have this degree of self-actualization and can recognize themselves in the mirror, and we'll all be able to come together in this big kumbaya, and we'll be fine. And it's very, again, it's very retarded. Like, so for instance, when we talk about sympathy, right, he talks about how like diseases are being decimated, and he's got this figure tracking from 2000 to 2013 about how pneumonia, diarrhea, malaria, and measles and HIV/AIDS are all going down. And he's talking about how sympathy, the ever-expanding circle of sympathy with leaders such as Bill Gates, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and even George W. Bush.
Like Bill Gates. Like these great men like Bill Gates.
These great men like Bill Gates, whose greatest contribution may have been like telling the federal government to go screw itself when it comes to tech monopolies or something like that. Who knows? I can't say what I really think that he's best known for and whatnot, but we'll keep it here. Whereas he's like, conversely, progress can be reversed by bad ideas such as conspiracy theories being spread by the Taliban and Boko Haram, that vaccines sterilize Muslim girls, or the ones spread by affluent American activists that vaccines cause certain conditions.
I don't like people who say that Bill Gates' vaccines are bad.
Yeah, like conspiracy theory that's spread by Taliban and Boko Haram that vaccines sterilize Muslim girls. Well, how many people have Bill Gates sterilized in the last 20 years?
The passage of time did not treat this book very well. You could imagine if it was written just a bit later, you could find somewhere in this book the phrase, you know what, we should just hand the government over to great men like Elon Musk. And flash forward to now.
Absolutely.
I think Ted had a great comment here.
He's not in the book, by the way, Elon. Oh, I stand correct. Maybe he is. Yeah, I know he is.
Ted said sympathy is very important. This does not include Palestinians. You know what I mean? Like that. That's what these guys are. And, I think it's very interesting that we're dropping this, as there was a big interview in the news recently. It was Douglas Murray, and he was on Joe Rogan, and he's one of these types. I would group a lot of the intellectual dark web guys into this group, even though they're kind of on the fringes of it, but they were very anti-Islam, pro-free speech, but I think they have more in common with this than anything else. Douglas Murray, not officially in the IDW, but he was always in that milieu. It's interesting how they were friendly somewhat to some right-wing ideas, pro-free speech, defenders of some of our friends, colleagues, comrades who have been deplatformed, what have you. But on the issue of Israel and Palestine, they pivoted, all of them. Every single one of them pivoted to the exact same narrative that now we need censorship. Now disinformation is a problem. Even guys like Douglas Murray, who admittedly I quite liked in the past. I liked his book, The Strange Death of Europe, which is a very detailed accounting of the mass migration crisis in Europe. And he was on the ground, he was interviewing people. And it was, a good, valuable work in the canon of the Great Replacement nonfiction, right? But then they all end up at the exact same place. And I would assume Steven Pinker would think the exact same thing about, he would worship Elon Musk within the context of this book, but politically now he would say, well, Elon Musk, of course, must be in jail. Because you know what? He was a great man, but now he's not. He was on the side of science, but now it's disinformation. It's bad. He had good ideas, but now he has bad ideas. And bad ideas chase out the good ideas. And you know what? That's not progress. It doesn't matter if it's scientific.
If bad ideas chase out the good ideas, that begs the question as to why do they do that? Is it because of force? Is it because of popular reasoning. Well, most of the time, ideas spread because of force or because those ideas are the ones that are feeding you and keeping you alive. And you've got the means to support and purport those ideas. I mean, it's a nature of power, which doesn't really... It gets obliquely discussed about in this book. I find it particularly interesting. The only time that Elon Musk gets mentioned is when he's talking about artificial intelligence, where Musk had said at one point in time that, the robo-apocalypse, things like that are more dangerous than nuclear weapons. And to a large extent, I agree with that take. I think that you can do a lot more damage with artificial intelligence than you can by just vaporizing a couple 100,000 people at the end of the day. Because if you can deploy it effectively, then great. Now all of a sudden, you've created a sort of a genetic bottleneck of sorts with all sorts of things. Or you've just subsidized India and made more Indians, and that's even more terrifying.
I'm just looking at the title of this chapter, and I know my good friend Ted is in the chat. This seems like a meme right here. Dare to understand. Like, what an annoying thing to
I
type.
love Ted because he said my other plans were canceled, so I guess I'm going to annoy people in live chat instead. Thank you, Ted. We greatly appreciate it.
Ted's my spirit animal.
He's a great guy.
I just want to read another part here just to set this up in his own words. Make sure here we go. What is the Enlightenment? What is the Enlightenment? There's no official answer. I would disagree, but let's go on anyway. There's no official answer because the era named by Kant's essay, he refers to Kant a lot in this, and Kant's appraisal of the Enlightenment. And so I don't really believe that there's no consensus on the years that bookend the Enlightenment. But anyway, named in Kant's essay, was never demarcated by opening and closing ceremonies like the Olympics. What a normie thing. What a Reddit thing to say. Nor are its tenets stipulated in an oath or a creed. The Enlightenment is conventionally placed in the last 2/3 of the 18th century, though it flowed out the scientific revolution and the age of reason in the 17th century and spilled into the heyday of classic liberalism of the first half of the 19th. Provoked by challenges to conventional wisdom from science and exploration, mindful of the bloodshed of recent wars of religion, that's an important part for the rest of this book, and abetted by the easy movement of ideas and people, the thinkers of the Enlightenment sought a new understanding of the human condition. The era was a cornucopia of ideas, some of them contradictory, but four themes tie them together: reason, science, humanism, and progress. I think that's a good summary there as well.
No, I would agree wholeheartedly. That's the exact sort of thing that this book is about.
As I read that, there's two books that we had covered on Blood Satellite previously, and I find myself referring to them a lot. One was a book that he cites in this book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. It's a pretty short book, but it takes a look at the scientific revolution and how it actually occurred. And this other book that
the Thomas Kuhn book?
That's right, yeah.
The one they give to every poli-sci major in their 101 class.
Exactly. You shouldn't base everything you believe on that, but it's interesting. And I think it really proves the opposite of what a lot of people think, by showing that there wasn't really a scientific revolution. These things happen through fits and starts. It's a conflict. It's a conflict of ideas. He makes it sound as if the Enlightenment was just this orgy of ideas that was just flourishing as a result of this chain of progress, and it wasn't. And he looks at very specific flashpoints in what we might call human development, but it was a conflict of ideas. Sometimes it was filled with bloodshed, right? Like people, they were not friends. These were not colleagues. These were people like fighting over discoveries and ideas. It was very contentious, as it continues to be. And so the entirety of a scientific revolution was a revolution in the sense, if you look at the October Revolution or any revolution, it's always in a process of dying and sometimes miraculously survives, and then one leader dies and someone else takes it on and it mutates over time. See, that to me is much more interesting, but that really strikes at the heart of the mythology of the Enlightenment. Furthermore, there's this other amazing book that I think about from time to time. It was The Crisis of the European Mind by Paul Hazard. I recommend anyone read that. That is a history of the Enlightenment, and you can contrast this entire book against that one. And he shows, and to his effort, Niall Ferguson in The Square of the Tower, he kind of gets into graph theory. He shows how the Enlightenment actually occurred, because like you said here, it's like a free flowing of people and ideas. That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened at all. It's quite the opposite. We can tell through tracking the passage of letters and communications between people that within France and Vienna and all throughout Europe, there were these centers of what you might call intellectual awakening, but they were segmented. They were not in open communication at all. In fact, they didn't fucking like each other. And it was up to a few key, what we call power nodes, as he was describing this in terms of graph theory. And this is how everything operates, by the way. You have these movements over here, and they're apart, and they don't like each other. They don't get along. The American Revolution was also like this. But they leave it up to a few key power nodes that travel between these sorts of groups and then ferry information. That is how they're connected. But it's not the case at all that they overlap in any fucking way whatsoever. So again, that strikes at the mythology of the Enlightenment, that people were just exchanging ideas. That's not how it was at all. And furthermore, what I love about the Crisis of the European Mind is that he draws a very bolded line between the Enlightenment and what will become rationalism. So there's this idea of the Enlightenment, which might have been more scientific inquiry. The scientific revolution led to the Enlightenment, then led to rationalism, where it was a fascination with nature and wanting to understand nature. It was a movement of understanding. And you could have that movement, that revolution, within a relationship with the church, within religion, because you're just trying to understand God's plan, God's mind, God's universe. But only later, with certain philosophers, Spinoza being one of them, did it turn into what we could describe as a culture of critique. That's when the scientific method...
If you want to, sorry to interrupt, but if you want a sign of how bad this book has aged, yet the biggest single change in the international order from Enlightenment thinking is an idea that we seldom appreciate today. War is illegal. For most of history, that was so not the case.
No, they wrote it down. You can't do it.
Can't do it. Well, and I mean, to talk about Kant, he refers a lot to Kant's essay, the Perpetual Peace. And it's after this, he says, only after World War II that the pacifying forces identified by Kant and others were systematically put into place. So really what Pinker here is just adoring is the post-war consensus. That's
absolutely.
That's what this book's about. This is the worship of the post-war order. That's it.
He thinks that the post-war consensus and this innovation called international law, we have the United Nations. So of course you can't have war. It's illegal to do that now. So that, I guess that's why we don't have it, right? That's why we don't have war anymore, because we made it illegal. What, you can't be a criminal. What are you gonna do if you're a fucking country and you declare war? You're going to jail, right?
You don't want to be a war criminal, do you? You don't want to be like Saddam Hussein, do you?
You want to be a war criminal and go to prison with black people?
And even when they talk about prison, it's that normie sadism of like, you're gonna be a chud and you're gonna go to prison.
That'd be great.
You're gonna get molested.
Just
what are you, Kanye West?
I love Chud Pinker. New character, Chud Pinker. It's like
Chud Pinker.
The West innovated this thing called international law. So if you do a genocide, you're gonna end up in prison with Jamarcus, and you're gonna get raped by a black guy.
That's
forever.
Terrible. You don't want to go to jail, do you? You don't want to go to war.
Chud Pinker.
It's true. You don't want to be a chud. Sounds terrible.
I'm going to move. I think I lost my train of thought before. I think I was talking about a crisis of the European mind, but just to end that the Enlightenment mutated into this thing called rationalism, which became a culture of critique, which in my view perverted what was a very fascinating European movement of discovery of nature and inquiry into the forces behind everything into something that is used to deconstruct society. So it's taking the scientific instruments, instead of aiming them outward, you aim them exclusively inward at yourself, at your identity, at your culture, at your religion. Anyway, I won't go into the whole book, but Crisis of the European Mind, it portrays the Enlightenment not as this great flourishing of new ideas, but a highly contentious, filled with bad actors, filled with nefarious individuals, and not this sort of lateral, meeting of the minds as the way it's portrayed. I think that's more accurate.
Yeah, and I think also that what you get out of this is that there's a huge desire to blame Germany. And so if you go to page 196, he talks about romantic militarism. And he says, perhaps the biggest impetus to romantic militarism was declinism, the revulsion among intellectuals that thought that ordinary people seemed to be enjoying their lives in peace and prosperity. Cultural pessimism became particularly entrenched in Germany through the influence of Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Jacob Burckhardt, George Simmel, and Oswald Spengler, author of Decline of the West. We will return to these ideas in chapter 23. To this day, historians of World War I puzzled over why England and Germany, countries that have a lot in common, Western Christian, industrialized, influent, would choose to hold a pointless bloodbath. The reasons are many and tangled, but insofar that as they involve ideology, Germans before World War I saw themselves as outside European or Western civilization, as Arthur Herman points out. In particular, they thought that they were bravely resisting the creep of liberal, democratic, commercial culture that had been sapping the vitality of the West since the Enlightenment, with the complicity of Britain and the United States. Only from the ashes of a redemptive cataclysm, many thought that a new heroic order would rise. They got their wish for a cataclysm, and a second one, even more horrific one after that. The romance had finally been drained from war. The peace had become the stated goal of every Western international institution. Human life has become more precious, while glory, honor, preeminence, manliness, heroism, and other symptoms of excess testosterone have been downgraded. The other thing, too, is that he talks about the idea of how dumb things like nationalism or ideology are, despite being a huge ideologue. This is that he can't seem to understand why would anyone want to die for a flag or die for a cause.
Yeah, like he doesn't understand it, but doesn't want to understand it either.
He doesn't want to discuss the idea that, well, why do people have these beliefs?
Why do people believe things at
honor?
all? Like, why do we have beliefs? Why do we have faith? Like, doesn't it make you feel
crazy?
sad?
You have beliefs? That's so dumb.
Well, he says in one book, because I don't go into this just wanting to challenge it immediately, but we've discussed so many different books over the years that I kind of got my opinions ready. And he says, I think we could all agree that no one's in favor of death. I mean, I disagree. I think you actually need to be in favor of death from even a soft eugenic perspective, but you have to understand that death is necessary and certain sacrifice is also important. You know what I mean? But he would not accept any of that. It only makes sense. It only makes rational sense to hate death and want to get yourself as far away from death as possible, which is why guys like him are so big into transhumanism, because death is just another problem to solve. Death is the ultimate disease to cure. Whereas someone like you or I would actually and very passionately take the opposing side. Was no, we need death. Death is important. Genetic bottlenecks are important. Eugenic filters are important, and we don't know what a human being's mind is like when it gets to 500 years old. That should scare you. That shouldn't excite you. But it's almost like he's never even considered a single worst case scenario in his entire fucking life. Like he's never thought, how could this go bad?
Yeah, well, also that there's no. This is the thing about. This is why I find Paul Virilio so interesting. Is that he does talk pretty extensively about what he talks about is the original accident, or the study of acceleration, wherein we have ideas that are invented or created, and we don't really consider that what we've also invented with them are ways in which they can go wrong. So the invention of the train, ergo, means the invention of the first train derailment. Even though it hasn't happened yet, we've invented it. So instead, we live in a society where, actually, the progress of decriminalizing homosexuality, the process of decriminalizing all these other things, has been overall a net good for our societies, because it allows us to examine that the world is better. And he quotes Barack Obama from, I think, 2015, where he says, if there was any other point in time in the world where you would want to be born, you would be now, and you would pick it, no questions asked.
Yeah, let me see if I could find that. I wrote this down in my notes. I just wrote insane Barack Obama quote. So let me just highlight this here. If you had to choose a moment in history to be born, and you did not know ahead of time who you would be, you didn't know whether you were going to be born into a wealthy family or a poor family, what country you'd be born into, whether you were going to be a man or a woman, If you had to choose blindly what moment you'd want to be born, you'd choose now. And I love that because I think it's important to remind people how many just nonsense dog shit things that Obama said that they're trying to ignore. Like, forget he said that. Like, what a nonsense statement that is. Which is like, that's what the end of history is, by the way. If you ever need any more clarification, like, it's the belief that now is the greatest time in human history. The only thing that could conceivably be better is tomorrow. If that sounds reductive, it absolutely is, but that's what they believe. And I think they really believe that.
Well, they kind of have to, because there's no question of what maintains the system at all. This is the thing I find really interesting when you talk to sort of these and even amongst like gay activists or whatever, they'll be very open with you saying, well, you know, the world is such a good place right now. Or like the world is being better because I'm allowed to exist or live or whatever. And it's just like, well, you exist because you're a political tool of the state. Like, I mean, like, think about this when we talk about like J.B. Pritzker or anyone who works with like the transgender industrial complex. Like, you are creating a class of people that are permanently dependent on you. And you've created the ultimate golem / eunuch. You've reinvented the court eunuch is what you've done. You know, and so what does that mean for us? Well, it doesn't mean that like, oh, I get to exist. It just means that we've created old tools that, you know, we thought we were so enlightened to reinvent. It's the same thing with like slavery. It's just like, well, aren't you so glad we've gotten rid of slavery? It's like, no, we have a slavery system. We just call it a visa system. It's different. It's like indentured servitude, but like less white.
Exactly. How much has actually changed and how much has just evolved into a different form? Like, have we really addressed any of the issues? Do we still essentially have a class or caste system just by a different name? I'm not even trying to say that's a point of contention. I'm not trying to say I'm complaining about that, but like, I think that's the root of his problem. He thinks a lot of these problems have been solved and they haven't.
Not at all.
I've got one thing here. This is just, I'm looking at page 24.
And it's not like they're going to go away either. I mean, this is the thing. We don't live in a post-scarcity environment. And I mean, like, there's this dream that some have that like, oh, maybe one day we will. And I don't see that happening. Not in my lifetime, not at all. But also that every time that we see these claims about growth and progress and everything like that, well, what emerges out of it? Well, really nothing really worthwhile. Because all that it is growth for growth's sake. And growth for growth's sake is a cancer.
That's a great point. And that is really fundamental to their religion, too, that growth is good. Growth of everything is good. Growth without limit should be the goal. Growth of human age, human pleasure, pleasure without end, just materialism without end. If you increase materialism, then everything gets better. Otherwise, why live at all? You see what I'm saying? And so
why live without your stuff?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my stuff. What am I going to do without my stuff?
Here's a point where you can see early on in the book, he starts to build the case against religion. He says here, the thinkers of the age of reason and the Enlightenment saw an urgent need for a secular foundation for morality because they were haunted by a historical memory of centuries of religious carnage, the Crusades, the Inquisition, witch hunt, the European wars of religion. They laid that foundation in what we now call humanism, which privileges the well-being of individual men, women, and children over the glory of the tribe, race, nation, or religion. Given that we are equipped with the capacity to sympathize with others, there's that word again, nothing can prevent the circle of sympathy from expanding from the family and the tribe to embrace all of humankind. So I think that shows his aim there, which is like, oh, you know how you feel for your friends and family.
How does sympathy expand? And I mean, this goes back to just basic right-wing talking points. It's just like, how am I supposed to expand this great cult of sympathy to like Carmelo Anthony's family?
He believes that, as perhaps the father believes, that this is just an individual subject to socioeconomic factors. Obama said that Trayvon Martin could be his son.
Been his son.
And I think this black kid could also be my son. That's what he interpreted from that fucking exchange. These people are insane, and then just beat down and propagandize and strip to their dignity, their husk, their paperclip men. But I can't put myself in these people's shoes. If I cannot empathize with you, I see you almost as inhuman. You know what I mean? Like when I see a father immediately forgiving the murderer of his son and then subjecting himself willingly to humiliation after humiliation, I stop seeing you as less than human. I don't want to, but I see you as something else.
I see you as just mentally ill or ideologically captured against your own will. Like, do I just and I get it for all sorts of reasons, for political pressure, for the fact that, I mean, it's a very clear point. Like people just don't. There's whites primarily, at least in America, individualize before, whereas blacks and every other minority group just they collectivize.
Yeah, when you hear a story about, and this is a real story I'm referencing, but I'm paraphrasing here, a story of a father who shoots his son's sexual abuser pre-trial, or just assassinates him, doesn't care about the consequences. Everyone looks at that the same way. Anyone who matters looks at that and feels joy. They feel like, yeah, that's good. He shouldn't even go to jail for that. I bend the law, break the law. I don't give a shit. But when they see this other father doing the exact opposite, forgiving the killer, he would forgive his son's sexual abuser. You feel a tightness inside you. You feel disgust. I think men and women of character all feel that. And it's indescribable. And I think if people are being honest, they see that. And if they saw that man being beaten to death, they wouldn't feel anything. And that's not a good thing to admit, but it is true.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really see anything wrong with that statement.
I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying
I'm not endorsing
it.
I'm saying that it is what it is, and that's sort of the unfortunate reality that we live in. Because for everyone else, like those are just basic, bare bone political, biological realities to which is not addressed at all. He decries what he calls scientific racism in the text, which for me is a little funny to listen to, despite the fact that even your heroes like Watson and Crick. I think it was Watson that got like a lot of his awards and a lot of his stuff like retroactively pulled because he had acknowledged about racial and intelligence differences between blacks and whites. It's like, so the thing about like the Enlightenment is also that a lot of these Enlightenment thinkers were incredibly racist by 2018 standards that we're going to conveniently gloss over because they're like, well, the limitations of their time. Aren't they so good that they have this universality? And I'm like, I don't think that they considered certain populations in Africa human. But okay, Mr.
Like they were firm believers in the circle. There were people in London at that moment that thought the French were a different species. They thought the Germans might as well be Africans. And you could easily say that the Enlightenment was because of those beliefs. You could say that it was the racism that actually caused all that. But Steven Pinker takes the opposite approach, of course, which is saying, well, no, they succeeded despite that. They were victims of circumstance. They were subjects of their time. But, you could debate every single one of these points. You can debate every single one of his claims that it wasn't them rising above these things. It was these things, these dirty, toxic, noxious things that caused the Enlightenment. But,
well, and then towards the end of the book, he's just like, well, now in the age of Trump, it's really sad to see this like retraction from the Enlightenment. Like, isn't it so sad that people think that like something fishy was going on at Comet Pizza? Don't you think it was really depressing that like Donald Trump can lie so flagrantly and that the news isn't doing enough to fact check him? When he never asks the question, he just assumes that people are retards. That, well, why did people want to believe this in the first place? Why do people want to assume that the things that Trump says or any sort of right-wing position is true? Is it because it's like a knee-jerk belief that perhaps there's a point to these things? That, hey, I don't necessarily think that all of these guys are like satanic pedophiles, but like actually most of these guys really do seem to be satanic pedophiles, and we should look into that.
Well, what's interesting for someone like Steven Pinker, who purports to be an academic, a thinker, an intellectual.
There's a lot of feels over reals here.
There's a lot of feels over reals, a lack of curiosity. I don't see any attempt to understand nationalists or Trump supporters. He would just say they're insane, they're delusional, they're bad people. Like no joke, he would say, well, they're bad people possessed by bad ideas and they're anti-progress. Like there's no question in my mind.
And we're just gonna kill them.
like ask Douglas Murray right now. It's like, why do people side with the Palestinians over the Israelis? Like, why can you imagine that they would do that? He'd say, well, it's just disinformation and evil people that took on the role of puppet masters, and it's good versus evil, and I'm anti-evil, and maybe, hey, maybe you're pro-evil, but for me, it's being anti-evil.
I'm so pro-good that I'm I can't finish that joke.
I'm a pro good guy. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you don't like.
I'm so pro good guy. I work with Israel.
Hey, maybe you're in favor of babies being kicked to death, but hey, speak for yourself, pal. I'm against that.
Speak for yourself, Chud. I'm pro good. That means I can never be wrong.
And it's great.
It literally is the Norm Macdonald joke about how good guys have won every single war throughout history.
Yeah, it is. And again, only Norm Macdonald could phrase it that way, where I think the people who don't deserve to hear that can't hear it. Like the people who it's designed to critique are so fucking stupid that they won't even see those words together and understand that it's against them. Whereas me, I'll just scream it in their face with a hammer in each hand and then just start breaking my own kneecaps and like,
well, that's how you know that the Pope is dead.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to skip ahead here right to the very end. And I think we might even have different copies of the book here. So maybe when you give me page numbers, it might not line up. But this is how he ends the book, and it kind of circles back to the start. He says, in summary of the Enlightenment, right? He says, this heroic story is not just another myth. Myths are fictions, but this one is true to the best of our knowledge, which is the only truth we could have. I love that line.
True to the best of our knowledge. Well, isn't... Okay.
That means there is no truth. There's only knowledge. Truth is the measure of the knowledge that we have. But whereas you or I or many of the readers would see truth as its own a priori pursuit, and there's knowledge and information data, but it is something true at the base of everything. But he's like, no, truth is just we get data and then we think data. When he says truth, he means accuracy. He doesn't believe in truth.
Well, also the consensus-based reality. Like, well, truth is a matter of the consensus and peer review, and this is really the only way that we can measure things, because truth can change. Definitions can change based on the circumstances. We're not going to talk about whether or not that's based off political conveniences, like changing the definition of a recession in the Biden administration. But, that's just sort of the way that, data works.
How do we know what's true? Well, you know what? We've got a peer review.
We trust the experts. We have a priestly class.
We have a priestly class. We have peer review, and that's that's not even the best idea, but it's the best one we've got. Until what? Who invents a better one? Like, what are you talking about? It's just more consensus. Well, the ultimate consensus is democracy, and maybe we should vote on truth. I could say that to him right now, and he would say that was a great idea. Let me just continue on here. We believe it because we have the reasons to believe it. As we learn more, we can show which parts of the story continue to be true and which ones false, as any of them might be and any could become. I don't think Steven Pinker is a stupid man. I wouldn't be so arrogant as to say that, but that's a very stupid thing. That sounds like your average Redditor's understanding of science. And he is a scientist, I believe, but he's saying, like, this is how we discover. We have a good idea until we find a better idea, and then maybe that better idea isn't as good, but you know what? We kind of just will figure it out. Like, that's a very foolish way of understanding. Like, you have not convinced me that you have the skills to ascertain what is even accurate. You're just kind of leaving it up to other people, the system. You're leaving it up to the invisible hands of progress itself, which you have substituted for God. The only God is progress and the belief that we're always progressing because we can't not progress. But that sounds like a poor substitute for a divine creator. That just sounds like a bunch of fucking faggots whacking off. Anyway, continue on here. It says, and the story belongs not to any tribe, but all of humanity, to any sentient creature with the power. Okay, let me just step back here. Really underscore this. And the story belongs not only to any tribe, but to all of humanity, to any sentient creature with the power of reason and the urge to persist it into being. So he's now expanding this to extraterrestrials. He's expanding this to
any creature with the ability to reason. Well, does that mean that, like, the guy who doesn't understand how to build a bridge in Timbuktu.
Well,
Is he
also,
capable?
does that mean any AI? Does that mean any like an NPC
But
in a
also,
video
like,
game?
but it's also a clear ignorance that, like, so for instance, take a look at the study on COVID vaccine hesitancy, and it was like the bell curve meme about like the dumb guy was like, no, I don't trust it, and then people with PhDs and postgraduate education were actually the most hesitant as well, alongside their counterparts on the opposite end of the bell curve. Whereas it was sort of like the midwit sort of thing there. And while that sort of overgeneralizes sort of the claim about, well, who was rejecting or who was wanting it, I think that there's a point to be made there that, like, actually there are people who are rational enough to be skeptical of your belief system. And if you're not willing to entertain the fact that you can be wrong, because Pinker certainly doesn't do that. You listen to any interview that he's in, he is going to flat out tell you that he is right every time, and that reason and progress and the rest will prove his points with a better degree of accuracy than any sort of claim that you can make. Why? Well, we can dodge around certain questions, like, well, clearly, the definition can change. A new study might come out. I might change my position. But his political orthodoxy, is not going to change. Why would it change? I'm clearly in the position of moral superiority because it's the Reddit r atheism quote. I am enlightened by my own intelligence.
I got this one thing here at the end of the quote I was saying was, for it requires only the convictions that life is better than death, health is better than sickness, abundance is better than want, freedom is better than coercion, happiness is better than suffering, and knowledge is better than superstition and ignorance. And I just like that as the capstone because I know as a white male Catholic, I disagree with all that shit. I disagree. Hey, I think death is often better than life. I think suffering is great. I would rather suffer than be happy. I'm suffering right now. Fuck happiness. Freedom is better than coercion. Well, you actually don't have freedom. You only have coercion. No one's ever been free. No one in the history of the world's ever been free. Shut up. Knowledge is better than superstition and ignorance. No, I think superstition is better than knowledge. I think I would rather have knowledge and superstition and ignorance, because what you fail to understand is that ignorance is coded into the human being at some level. Not everything is a problem to solve. And if we believe in anything, it's, why do we believe in the necessity of death? I had a commenter in the chat here say that I had my belief in the necessity of death was lame, but I do think it's a necessary eugenic filter. I think is the best one we've got. I think a human being living to 700 years, we don't know how the mind or the personality rots, or we don't know
even if
the new types of insanities that could occur.
Yeah, I was about to say we don't live that long to begin with, and so it raises a fun question of, even if we lived that long, what are the evolutionary pressures that we alleviate? Or even worse, what sort of new dysgenic things do we engender? So I mean, like, if you wanted to be really hardcore eugenicist about it, not that I am, in part because I like living myself and I was born with a congenital problem, but like, if you want, let's be purists about it. Let's say, okay, well, because of the mass widespread use of eyeglasses, like genes that encourage blindness, astigmatism, have allowed to live on past perhaps the natural point they would have died off due to people, dying or not surviving in tribal or pre-modern era environments. Well, okay, we lived to 700 years, or even with like ChatGPT right now, Microsoft got rid of their Microsoft Copilot and a lot of their workstations. Why? Because it's actually making their employees retards. This is something that even McLuhan will talk about in Understanding Media, that all media is an extension of man. But when you extend it, the actual thing that you were originally using is going to be atrophied. So, for instance, if you were a younger person, like if you were when you were younger, say you're in your like mid 30s or younger, you probably have a good chunk of phone numbers from your contacts list memorized. With the advent of smartphones, a lot of people no longer memorize it because they can just refer to their contacts. They don't really need to worry about memorizing certain phone numbers in case they're in a place and they need to call somebody. They need to use a payphone. Those things go away. And so I think that we kind of take for granted this linear degree of progression for how things are. And also, I think if you get rid of death, you lose one of the primary evolutionary pressures for why we do shit. Why do we fight and kill and fuck? Because we know we're going to die one day, or someone's going to try and kill
So
us.
it's how we define not only sacrifice, but a great amount of what duty is. And just to call attention to Oswald Dart here, know the idea that it's only eugenic, it's lame, death is much more than just eugenics. I am aware, I never said it was just eugenics. Listen to me, look at me. You're being a silly Billy right now. I know how this ends. This ends with both of us agreeing. We don't even really disagree. It's semantics. Put her there. Let's just shake on it. Let's just have a good stream. We don't gotta be at odds like this. I'm here. I'm in a good mood. I got a Rockstar Zero energy. It's fruit punch flavored. Don't harsh this.
That's Enlightenment Now.
Yeah, that's Enlightenment tomorrow. So sorry, you're making some very good points there. I derailed
also, I really hate the fact that I'm going to make this reference live on air. There is a series of short stories I've read on the internet. I will not say where, that poses an interesting question about, like, well, what if, death stopped, and we stay in our current condition? How does humanity get around the fact that we don't die like we used to? Raises a fun question, now doesn't it? Now, what does that mean for us? Like, how are we going to divvy up resources? How are we going to correct this or that or the other? How are we going to deal with the fact that inequality is still a thing, resource scarcity is still a thing, but now we're not dying anymore? Crazy shit, right? I think that we could probably evolve to handle that, but also at the same time, I think it would be insane, just because I think that all of the realities that, like, the right will talk about, like, who uses resources, diversity, those all become harsh realities that no one wants to talk about, but we kind of have to. And so I think that if we were to get rid of death, or that death being a primary motivator, I don't know. I just feel like they're essential. And are we going to live past our length of time? I think maybe Brian Johnson might succeed. I don't know if I want to put silicone in my penis for the rest of my life, but
I only want Brian Johnson to live forever. I want everyone else to die, but I want whatever that man is to live to be 1,000 years. I want to see what that is like in 200 years.
If we do get to live that long, would I take it? Maybe, but, like, can we solve the neurodegenerative problem? No. Even Pinker admits that bodily deterioration and senility are natural parts of the human condition, and I don't know how you get rid of them. I would love to know how, because I know people with dementia, and I think that's fucking tragic and terrifying as all hell. And I see, and again, why do we do things? Because we know we're going to die one day. All these great things that have ever been built or made or written are kind of like being made because we all kind of know, well, fuck, I'm going to die one day.
And that's what's so interesting about this book, where if you oppose any of it, you have to understand what it is that you oppose. Do you oppose this entire secular humanist project, which is really opposing materialism and opposing the belief that the purpose of humankind writ large is just to maximize happiness and pleasure and follow the growth curve to infinity, and I guess populate the stars, populate every planet. You know what I mean? Like, do you reject all of that? Like, do you reject that the highest aim is maximal, materialism? Infinite money, infinite food, infinite why not infinite orgasms forever? Is there anything philosophically or metaphysically or ontologically wrong with that? To his mind,
I'm just reminded of that Owen Cyclops comic where he sees the guy with, like, the VR goggles, where it's like
and
Harry Potter and whatever.
There's like wine hooked up to an IV.
Hooked up, the, like, auto masturbator 3000. He's like, this feels wrong, and the guy's like, just let people fucking enjoy things.
Just let people enjoy things. But that's him. That's when we talk about the Redditor, that's usually who we mean. There's this archetype, the secular humanist. I wouldn't even call them an atheist, because no one wants to be an atheist anymore, but they say they're a secular humanist because that sounds more factual, because you got facts on your side, right? But like they don't have any argument against that. Why not that? And I'm reminded of, what was that guy's name? Arthur Chu. Remember Arthur Chu?
Oh yeah, where he says that like he wins in the end.
I win in the
because-
end because people are dumb and people are weak, and there's more of me than there are of you. Speak of himself as if he was a virus or a swarm of locusts, which is how a lot of the third world is talked, by the way. It's like, yeah, guess what? There's going to be more of us, and we're going to move in, and we're going to shit, and we're going to fart, and we're going to come all over the place, and you're not going to be around anymore. Haha. Like they speak of themselves in a way a European never would. You would never hear a Westerner or a European speak of themselves as if they're a fucking virus. And that's why it's so off-putting when I talk to these, multipolarity nationalists. Like, you guys are weak. We're going to move in like a tide of shit. I'm like, okay, that's how you see yourselves. That's the people who like this book. Our fucking stinky beige dominion's inevitable. Ha ha. And Steven Pinker, despite being one of the whitest looking men out there, I'm not sure if he is, maybe he's secretly Jewish or whatever, but he would play it very safe. And remember, we were talking before, he was talking about falling testosterone levels and, the cliff that masculinity has jumped off. He would never promote the end of masculinity, but he would say, it is good, though, that we're not as masculine anymore. I'm not saying we should stop. I would never advocate for anything.
I would never advocate for the thing that I'm advocating for.
Yeah, I would never advocate for a single fucking thing, but I will say it's the data shows, the graph seems to indicate that leads to less murder, so that's good. Because everything he does is data points, so anything that drives murder down is good. So putting chemicals in the water could do that too. These are the types of people who would be okay. They say, okay, overpopulation is a problem. I'm not saying that we should put chemicals in the water that kill sperm and make women's ovaries dry up, and then we spend a few years, no one's having kids, and everyone starts killing themselves.
I'm not saying the children of men was a good thing.
But if it just happened, I might be
so
happy.
Nice?
You want to talk about like a feminine way of expressing yourself. You want to talk about like, I feel like that would be good. Can we all agree that it would be good? But no one should do anything. But if it happens, I feel like that would be good. That's how he would approach every fucking thing.
He would. And I mean, that's the thing that sort of kills me about this is that also, for the record, I hate that movie with a fiery passion. Because it's such anti-white, anti-European resentment, whereas like the book itself is actually this really good commentary on like the death of like traditional Christian Britain, written by a woman, mind you.
Everyone, take a break. Okay, Steven Pinker's Jewish. I get it. Sorry, I got Everyone's got
lesson learned. Never suggest it before you get early life checked on stream.
I ignored the first rule of being online. Assume everyone is Jewish and every woman is trans. I apologize.
I'm so sorry.
Everyone is Jewish and trans online. Then guess what?
You didn't know this?
I found the never be wrong potion and I just took it. Forget the fucking fountain of youth. Forget the longevity.
Forget the fountain of youth. Forget the tree of good and evil. I need the never be wrong on the internet fruit.
I want to take the being right every ass time potion. Sorry, I got.
You can only take that potion, but you can never get married.
Well, look, now they're asking if I'm Jewish. This is exactly what I do.
Define. That's a very camp-bot answer.
Look up the define Jewish, define dimes, define define early life. Like what's
define
anything?
Wikipedia. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I could not help myself. I was being bad.
So he gets into this part here. How long have we been going for? Like an hour.
Oh, it doesn't matter. We can keep tearing into it.
There's this really interesting part here where he talks about this would be the main criticism against the Enlightenment, or what I think makes the Enlightenment special was that it was a very distinctly European phenomena. The Enlightenment did not occur elsewhere, and he's got to reckon with that. And he says, because he's trying to say what of these tribes, right? He says people are by nature illiterate and innumerate, quantifying the world as one, two, or many, and by rough guesstimates. They understand physical things as having hidden essences that obey the laws of sympathetic voodoo or magic rather than physics and biology. Objects can reach across time and space to affect things that resemble them or had been in contact with them in the past. Remember the beliefs of pre-scientific revolution Englishmen. By the way, I also think that is true, so fuck you. They think that words and thoughts can impinge on the physical world in prayers and curses. Well, they can, by the way. Anyway, they underestimate the prevalence of coincidence. No, I don't. Is it a coincidence that you're fucking gay and Jewish? They generalize from paltry samples, namely their own experience, and they reason by stereotype. Again, reason by stereotype.
The most effective form of like evolutionary discernment we've ever made.
What's another word for stereotype? What is it? It's called trend. Should we say let's stop saying stereotype, let's say trends. Have you noticed
there's a statistically significant portion of people, you know.
Yeah,
it's a frightening trend among blacks.
Are there certain graphs we're not allowed to look at? Projecting the typical traits of a group onto any individual that belongs to it. Well, I mean, that's what you want, because you want
But also, every study that we show about this is that even if you generate false positives, that's still evolutionarily more healthy than assuming, the opposite.
I like he says, projecting the typical traits of a group onto any individual, whereas he just said that humans by nature are illiterate and innumerate and believe stupid things and they're superstitious. Like, no, I'm not going to make any generalizations about a group.
I would never make generalizations, but oh, by the way, all you like dumb religious retards over there. Thank you, Mr. Pink. You're very cool.
It's such a George Carlin way of going about it, which is, an individual is smart.
I'm so glad he died before like Twitter was big. I said it.
Would that George Carlin die several times? Bring him back, kill him again. My suffering is that I could only be alive for George Carlin's death once.
It's the Nathan Hale, epitaph. I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. I regret that I have one life just to watch George Carlin die once.
I used to dislike Bill Hicks. As I've aged, I've become more ambivalent on Bill Hicks. As I've aged, I really don't like George Carlin. I really just everything about him, his essence. I don't want to say he's a representative of your generation, but like he's the epitome of this phenomenon that these guys I think believe, which is like everyone in the world is stupid except the people in this room right now. You're the smart ones. And that's it.
Because you're listening to me, and I want to make more money.
Yeah, people are stupid except you right now, who paid me. People, don't you hate people? Stupid idiots. Are we not allowed to know trends? No, everyone's stupid. The inheritor of that is Bill Burr. What do I know?
I'm just a dumb retard, and it's just like, well, yeah, we know you're dumb. Look at your wife.
Here's my opinion. I got an opinion here for 15 minutes. What do I know? Oh, shit in your hat. You're stupid. Oh, you have an opinion? Oh, you're an expert. You're an expert on it. You had a thought. You saw a thing and had an opinion. Fuck you. You're not allowed. What do I know? Go eat a shoe. Fuck. Just like a guy who's got the strongest opinions, but then also says no one's allowed to have opinions. Like, what is that type of guy? Has that guy existed across time, or is that just do we get to enjoy that? Why don't we get to have crucifixions? Why don't we get to have the brass bulls you put people in and you just cook them and you hear them scream and the kids go yay yay, the bull sounds. That used to be before we had Santa Claus. We can have both. We could fucking walk and chew gum at the same time. We could have Santa Claus. We could have Bill Burr burning to fucking death in a giant bronze bowl. We could do a lot of things. We could all have Bitcoin too. Anyway, we're reading a book here. I got to check whenever I'm not even looking at the screen. I'm just staring out my window right now, not blinking. And I'm looking at the chat. Okay, swish. Thank you. Okay. That could have gone either way. Now we're talking about Bill Hicks. An hour and a half in, we're at like page 50 of this 700-page book.
Well, I've been all over the place in my citations, but It's the same thing with why we covered white fragility is because I think it is important to understand, or at least try to understand, how these people think. Because if you don't understand, then you're in for a rough time.
Well, because I wanted to treat it seriously. I like steel manning my opposition. We all say shit lib. We don't like the shit libs. But what does the shit lib actually think? And I've seen Steven Pinker in interviews. I've seen him in debates. I've read his articles. But I was never impressed. But I said, okay, maybe he's just not good on mic. Not everyone can be us, Prude. But let me look at this successful, widely read author, highly praised author, and see what's in there. What am I missing? I'm always asking myself that. What am I missing? That's why we read the leftist literature. Maybe I'm wrong. And a lot of people don't have that. They're not possessed by that desire to know if they're full of shit. But I read this. I said, nope, it's stupid. It's dumb. And maybe I need to read Angels of Our Better Nature was another book he wrote. Maybe I got to read that. But I didn't leave this book convinced that the world is great. All I got was a scolding for believing that. And this was the same thing I got from like the e-acceleration movement. It wasn't that I was wrong. It's that I'm an impediment to their utopia. That me casting aspersions on anything they say or any individual, like I'm anti-progress. It's my fault and the fault of people like me that their perfect world isn't, that they're not living in the Foundation series, that we just haven't given enough credit and capital and praise to scientists or innovators, except the bad ones, right? Because now there's bad. We should have given everything to Elon Musk 3 years ago, right? That perfect Reddit scientist guy. He does cool things. He makes a flamethrower. He gets into a submarine war. Wow. Yippee. And now he's not, though. Now he's Satan because he's also taking money from scientists, which is great. Anyway, I got some more stuff here.
Yeah, go for it.
Just building on what I had just said about other cultures. Let me scroll down here. I think it's somewhere on this page. He goes, indeed, a common criticism of the Enlightenment project that it's a Western invention unsuited to the world and all its diversity, which is a fair criticism, he says it's doubly wrong-headed. For one thing, all ideas have to come from somewhere, and their birthplace has no bearing on their merit. What a frustrating thing to say. Just it's ideas. It's almost like Nassim Taleb, who I otherwise like, and I think he's right in his sort of black swan out sort of territorialization of discovery, understanding that there are known unknowns that are waiting to be discovered, and we just haven't discovered them yet. But the idea that ideas are free to be plucked from the air, and it just so happens, coincidentally, that all the ideas were plucked from the air over one geographic area.
Crazy how that works.
Yeah, but of course, we don't believe in coincidence. We're men of science. He goes on, though many Enlightenment ideas were articulated in their clearest and most influential form in 18th century Europe and America, they are rooted in reason and human nature, so any reasoning human can engage with them. They didn't, but they could. Like, just really unpack what he's saying there. It's like, of course, Europeans just did it, and these very specific regions in Europe and these very specific groups did it, but it could have been Africans, it could have been Aztecs, but it wasn't. Why wasn't it?
Why?
Just whatever.
Just pull that thread a little bit. Why? Maybe it's because there's a liberal epistemology crisis to where if I were to simply say, this is why things are, well, then that suddenly breaks the rules for why I believe this thing. Because I think the liberals have their own equivalent of theodicy, where like they can't explain why things happen the way that they want them to, or if liberalism not real, then like why GDP go up or whatever. It's like, well, if we acknowledge, it's the same reason we've talked about this before on the show, where it's like the alt-right really does emerge as a diverging point out of new atheism. Because if you are a believer that religion is fake and gay, and that God is not real, evolution is true, and certain peoples can perform better because there's differences in biology, okay, then doesn't that mean that some people might be better suited for the others? And it's like, oh, no, you can't do that. That would be bad.
You're not allowed to notice certain things within this framework. He goes on here. That's why Enlightenment ideals have been articulated in non-Western civilizations at many times in history. I don't think he cited any really, and I was looking through the citations, but whatever. The Romantic movement pushed back particularly hard against Enlightenment ideals. Rousseau, Johann Herder, Friedrich Schilling, and others denied that reason could be separated from emotion. Heroic struggle, and this is a good counterpoint, and I think this is a counterpoint that most people, our listeners, would subscribe to. Heroic struggle, not the solving of problems, is the greatest good, and violence is inherent to nature and cannot be stifled without draining life of its vitality. There are but three groups worthy of respect, wrote Charles Baudelaire: the priest, the warrior, and the poet. To know, to kill, and to create. A second counter-Enlightenment idea is that people are the expendable cells of a superorganism, the clan, the tribe, ethnic group, religion, race, class, or nation, and that the supreme good is the glory of this collectivity rather than the well-being of the people who make it up. Nationalism should not be confused with civic values, public spirit, social responsibility, or cultural pride. Interesting. The cultural... Again, this goes without saying. I know there's a dozen people watching this right now who are probably feverishly typing, but what do you mean by cultural pride? Something that your group can take that is distinct from other groups, that makes you special. You see what I'm saying? Like, you already have... I understand there's this thing called a group of people that is the... nucleus of a nation, the state apparatus, whatever form it takes. But you actually, because you understand there's a thing called a culture, you understand the other things must follow, right? And what do you mean by public spirit? These are just like neoliberal catchphrases. At no point does he dive into what a public spirit actually is, what that functions like. It's just like, yay, I like flags. I like
the nation. Okay, but what about the nation makes it good? Like, it's the ship of thesis, right? Like, you can't automatically assume all of a sudden, we're going to fix the problem. And if everyone came in and we slowly, changed the nation, as long as the ideas are there, we'll be fine. Like, this is something that, Charlie Kirk got more or less, griped for, not just, a month ago, where he was talking about, the American, government being, mainly Indians or whatever. And he was like, oh, no, it'd be fine. We'd be okay. And everyone's like, no, because it would cease to be America. Like, what are you talking about there, Charlie?
I just love record deepness here. Enlightenment ideals have been articulated many times in non-Western civilizations. Doesn't name one. I just want to highlight that. I was expecting an example from, I don't know, some Chinese dynasty 500 years ago. Give me the Huns, the Vikings. Give me
Genghis
one.
Khan was actually a very popular liberal Enlightenment degrowth.
Eric the Red was the ultimate fucking Kurzweil curve guy. But I loved that him explaining sort of the counter-revolution, and I really think that most people watching would subscribe to that, the belief that violence is inherent in nature. You can never really excise it from the human experience, just like you cannot really excise death and all of the pain, but also beauty, and also how we define the necessity of sacrifice and even childbirth, replication in the face of death, things like that. And also the priest, the warrior, the poet, to know, to kill, and to create. I like all of these things more than this gay secular humanist nonsense, which does not inspire you. And I think that's really what he's trying to do here, trying and failing. He is trying to inject vitalism into the secular humanist project. I don't think you can, because if I were to explain this heroic struggle section that I just read to a fucking 10-year-old, he would get it. He or she would get it. They would think that's very cool. They would be inspired by it. They would want to do great things with that. If I explain to them secular humanism, it sounds like fucking gay ass homework. It doesn't drive you to do anything. This is not inspiring. It's not energizing. It's not electrifying. So what is it? And it's him trying to say, well, this thing can also be your faith. It can be your everything. And like, it can barely even do its one thing it's trying to do now. I think it was Mark Trouble in the chat. I threw that up on the board at the start, saying that the scientific world has been rocked in the recent decades by a replication crisis.
I was just about to bring that up. Nowhere in this entire book does the replication crisis get mentioned. And I think that's particularly interesting because, of course, that is a relatively new phenomenon. But also, you would expect that might be a bit of an important counterclaim to address here. It's like, oh, actually, we have to deal with the fact that no, with also the advent of AI, people are just making up bullshit and talking about it for whatever reason, and that gets peer reviewed and accepted. And it's like, well, that's a bit of a concern. Like, why is it that like a lot of Asian countries, or especially like India and China, are just creating like bullshit AI models for their papers that get accepted in these shady journals? Like, that's interesting. Huh. Maybe that's a problem about like our current system of Enlightenment experts.
I want to keep going because I'm going to try and cram as much into these last little bit as we can. Let me see here. I think it's on this page. It says, most people agree that life is better than death. Health is better than sickness. Sustenance is better than hunger. All these things can be measured. If they have increased over time, that is progress. And I'm saying this to define what he means by progress. And he sees it as a very graph-intensive thing. If line goes up, then life equals better. Now, many listeners, many viewers understand what was that Mark Twain quote? There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Like you can tell any story you want with data points. You can define the axes however you want. You can tell a very convincing lie. This goes without saying. So you would think that an intrepid reader of this book would understand that. Like, you're not going to sway me with a fucking graph. You're not going to sway me with just a footnote. Like, actually explain it, which you can't do. But continuing on here, it says, all these things can be measured. That is progress. Granted, not everyone would agree on the exact list. Interesting. The values are avowedly humanistic and leave out religious, romantic, and aristocratic values like salvation, grace, sacredness, heroism, honor, glory, and authenticity. But most would agree that it's a necessary start. And here's a shocker. The world has made spectacular progress in every single measure of human well-being. Here's a second shocker. Almost no one knows about it. Like, that's the book right there. Like, did you know everything's better? Everything's the best? Here, I got this one fucked up fact. No one's happy because no one knows how great it is. And it doesn't scream to him that those things he listed, salvation, grace, sacredness, heroism, honor, glory, and authenticity, are not present and not addressed. Maybe that's why people are miserable. No, pish posh, poppycock, because he is subtly implying that's not important. That's an afterthought. Who gives a shit about sacredness? Who gives a shit about authenticity and meaning and purpose? Because we got more calories, and this is what I wanted to say. He's got this graph. I don't think I wrote this one down, but I'll just explain it right now. Take my word for it. He says at one point that the amount of calories consumed per person has gone up exponentially over the past 100 years, right? Therefore, world hunger is at an all-time low. Therefore, what the fuck are we complaining about? Now, if you just ponder that for a second, really ruminate, why are you measuring this in calories? Are there other measures of health? Because all that, what that tells me is we've innovated more ways to pack more calories into smaller morsels of food, which is just saying, oh, we eat more corn syrup. We eat more rice. We've injected more hormones into more fucking things. Like, we don't define our health by calories per fucking capita, you maniac, you evil, twisted retard. And this is where I see that. I'm like, oh, you're a dumb faggot piece of shit. Oh, you're my enemy now because you threw a calorie graph. I mean, you're hoping that I didn't notice that we don't live in the world, that you and I aren't people that walk around every fucking day saying, why is everyone fat and dying? Why is everyone miserable? Why is everyone's bones falling apart? Why is the sperm rate cratering? Why aren't people having kids anymore? Why do people feel like they're insane because of all the environmental chemicals? Well, you know what? That's actually good. It's good because all of those things were consequences of more chemical calories per food. And here's the crazy thing. You don't know how great that is. That's what this stupid motherfucker's telling you in his book. And he got rich off this, by the way. He's rich and dumb. He's a rich, dumb cunt. And he's telling you that you're dying, but aren't you happy? Isn't it better to die miserable and happy? That's what he's telling you in this book. Anyway, time to glance at the chat to see if any of that landed. What do you think about that?
This is, again, this is why I think the book is such a product of like the first Trump administration, where all of the points, like say what you will about anyone who's popular on parts of right-wing Twitter, but like raising attention to the fact that like, sperm rates are declining. There are significant issues with our agriculture, like things that used to be genuine, crunchy, liberal talking points from like even 30 years ago that people like Pinker or other rationalists would have talked about. Like, oh, there's a crisis of industrial grade agricultural farming, and that we're like depleting the arable land through the usage of like synthetic fertilizers, like things that are very like crunchy liberal topics that are now like, you know, almost basic raw egg nationalist talking points, where it's just like, well, these problems never got addressed, and you're supposed to tell me that like the world is actually doing pretty fucking good? No, I don't believe you for a second.
No, I agree completely. So I'm just getting to some of the chats here. Again, like this, like you had said, this is what's so frustrating about reading books like this, which is it's telling you that your lived reality is wrong. Like the arrogance.
Don't believe your lying eyes.
Don't believe your lying eyes, your lying pancreas, your lying knees, your lying fucking...
Your lying testicles. Like, come on.
Do not believe your lying soul and balls.
You know, trust your gut. Well, my gut tells me that you're full of shit.
My gut tells me that I need to be eating more fats and less slurry that you pumped into my water. That's supposed to make me calm. It makes my teeth whiter, but also fucking calcifies my pineal gland. Thank you for that. Thank you.
I want my third eye opened.
Oh, I want my third eye and my fourth mouth open. Huh? What? It's late. It's late. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm trying to... Okay, you know, let's do a graph. Let's
Let's go to the graph.
Throw it up on the...
I want to buy a vowel. I want to buy an I and an E, and then I'll just guess my content.
This is what I was talking about. Just the calories per person per day. Look at that. Up. Isn't it exciting? And also there's the United States, then world, then India. I love when India just starts.
India mentioned.
Here's the thing. If you want to talk about the Enlightenment, you want to talk about how ideas can be plucked from the trees, man. I don't know. Why did India just start counting things in 1940? Why did we start in the 1700s? Why did this one area start counting things way earlier than even more ancient peoples? You know, how many calories per day does India get? They get a lot of fucking calories. They're all skinny fat. An entire nation of skinny fat. They're shitting all the time. You're not going to tell me that they're not getting the necessary calories to fill an ocean with turds? Are they healthy?
Are you telling me? Oh, also, like their growth is stunted. Like Indian men are getting shorter. Like, tell me, like that's a good thing? No, it's not. I mean, not if you're Indian, but I mean, maybe if you're an Indian woman. But like, still terrifying. No. Am I not supposed to be worried about that? That sounds like I should be concerned. Oh,
Evan here is likely a European, saying, how the fuck do people eat 3,400 calories a day? I don't believe it.
Sir, if you want to have a good time with that, please go to the Dunkin' Donuts menu and look at the calorie count.
So it Belgian fingers type that post. Like the Europeans, like, how do you eat? How
do you eat 3,400 calories? Like, oh, dude. There's a reason why my country is known as the fat place.
It's so easy to eat a stupid amount of calories on accident. Like if you ever go to Europe and you're eating food that you think is bad, but it doesn't feel bad anymore, you realize, oh, they make the bread different here. They don't put fucking aborted fetuses in the bread. in France like they do over here. You don't know what cockamamie scheme you're eating today. Let me just move on here. Hold on. He goes at he defends democracy for a while here. I don't even know if I want to defend on that. He's defending market economy.
You don't need to defend that.
Centrally
I
planned.
think democracy can defend itself.
Yeah, I think. Why is democracy?
We can vote on it, guys.
Hey, look, democracy keeps conquering the world, so I guess that's evidence. That's it. Like the idea that everyone's just
we will impose our way of life on them by force.
Well, that's what they believe. They believe that China people are just.
We talked about that with like the post-war order. Like this is what the book is a defense of just post-war liberalism.
You know, he goes into inequality here. Maybe I'll just read this. This is interesting. He actually defends inequality, saying it doesn't even matter. He says, narratives about the causes of inequality loom larger in people's minds than the existence of inequality. That creates an opening for politicians to rouse the rabble by signaling out cheaters who take more than their fair share, welfare queens, immigrants, foreign countries, bankers, or the rich, sometimes identified with ethnic minorities. In addition to effects on individual psychology, inequality has been linked to several kinds of society-wide dysfunction. Either way, I suspect that's less effective to aim at the Gini index as a deeply buried root cause of many of the social ills. The simplest narrative of the history of inequality is that it comes with modernity. So it's interesting there. He's saying, you know, people get blamed for inequality.
Our advanced quality of life is because of modernity.
You know, people are always blamed. They're blaming the poor welfare queens. They're blaming
the immigrants.
They're blaming the billionaires. So do you just, here's the thing, do you believe that classes exist? Or do you believe income brackets exist at all? Like, what are you saying with that comment? So yeah, there's inequality, but it doesn't really matter. I'm like, you can't just, okay, look, I'm not trying to be a Marxist here, but I think it matters. I think you want to see a graph? I can find a graph that shows you that violence increases when sharp economic inequalities placed side by side. If a country is relatively poor, it will not be as violent as a nation where you have mansions right next to favelas. There's a graph for that too. What does that mean? Well, equality they're just wrong.
Brazil is bad.
Yeah, why is
There's your hot take for the evening. Brazil, not so great.
Oh yeah. Hazel here, 2,600 calorie milkshake.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I was talking about go look at the Dunkin' Donuts menu. You can have 2,800 calories for breakfast.
Well, because you can look. I used to drink more energy drinks, but I drink the zero sugar ones because they're like 10 calories or whatever. But you can easily you can pound an energy drink that's 260, 70 calories.
I saw some slop on Telegram earlier today where it was some large-breasted blonde woman. It was like, gentlemen, the calorie count, and it shows like one Starbucks drink, and it's like, this is 400 some odd calories. But like, and then she pulls out a dozen like white monsters, and she's like, "This is just a couple of hundred." You know,
it's true.
It's like, okay, very, very true, very true.
It's a good and true thing, but it's that people stop drinking just coffee and started drinking sort of like iced coffee macchiatos. Like
so, like I worked in Starbucks in my junior and senior year of high school, and the red pill for me was I am making man children. Arrested development women, their fucking milkshake that they need to live.
It's a treat.
It's a treat.
It's a little treat. You know,
it's a little treat.
I get a flavor shot. I get sprinkles. I get SSRIs in there. It's a big, cool treat. It's so far from coffee a lot of the time when you get these like iced cappuccino, whatever the fuck's. It's like, it's a caffeine delivery system. You might as well just inject caffeine into an
You might as
ice
well just
cream
take a
cone.
caffeine pill. That's it. Just take caffeine pills.
You just take caffeine.
Just take the Prevaritin, and like we'll be on our way. Thank you, honey.
It's also great if you work out in the morning. Like if I don't work out in the morning, I feel drained. If I do, I'm like, oh, I can take on the day. I'm gonna crush a couple monsters anyway, just for the heck of it, because I need to operate at maximum violence. I'm not committing maximum violence, but I need to be capable of it at all times.
I need to feel like I'm capable of it.
This
is why we need to implement my traffic solution policy.
The final traffic solution?
Yeah, this is so. Do you want to hear it? Have I told you this story before?
No.
Okay, chat. You're in for a good time. So every time, this is my policy to correct traffic and to reduce traffic congestion and to make drivers in America more polite. So every year, you have to get your vehicle inspected or you got to get your registration renewed, right? And so my policy is that every time that this comes, you are given at the DMV an RPG-7 with exactly one piece of munition, one RPG, okay? You can use it in your vehicle anytime you fucking want when you're driving. It could be on the road, it could be getting out of your parking lot, it could be dealing with pretty bad congestion. You get one shot. However, you can't re-get another rocket until you get your car inspected again in a year.
Until you get shot with a rocket, then you get.
Well, see, that's the other thing. So all of the low impulse, low IQ people, they are going to use it, and they're going to kill themselves, other dumb people, gangs, and other undesirable types. It's going to be great. Now, on top of this, you now implement a government jobs program for construction for the renewal of infrastructure. Also, the DoD is really going to like this because now you are studying the impact of American architecture on the usage of explosives and RPGs and what that might look like for war. So all this is taking place. The well-polite drivers, they're going to be more polite. They're going to be tactical about it. The ghettos are going to be, ethnically cleansed because they're going to kill each other with RPGs. And you're creating a jobs program in which gets people well-paying construction jobs, repair it, courtesy of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's going to be a good time. And wow, would you look at that? The country all of a sudden has less low-impulse drivers, less reckless people, and the people who don't have legally registered vehicles, i.e. immigrants and poor people, well, they don't have access to this, which means they get caught in the crossfire. Like, this is the Jonathan Swift modest proposal of the 21st century. And this is how you cure traffic.
See, Prude is a policy papers type guy. He's got these great ideas and he can articulate them in a highly effective way. Me, I'm simple. I hear a plan that puts more rocket-propelled grenades in the hands of honest ham and eggers across the country. I'm for it. You don't got to convince me anymore. From the jump, I liked this idea. I've never heard a good idea.
Fix. It's a simple fix.
Life can be simple, guys. You want to talk about, happiness has gone up. Have rocket launchers gone up?
Listen, I'm a simple guy. I think that the Bhutanese were right and that the gross national happiness metric is good and that we should really investigate it more often. And I think that, an RPG-7 on your way to work is a good idea.
Yeah.
Imagine giving the guy who drives your taxi cab in New York, the guy who, when he talks, makes it sound like he's got a lot of sense, some Greek guy that really wants to just take on the world. He's probably got some good ideas. Well, bam. Now he can really put those ideas into action.
You're not going to hear this coming out of the likes of Klaus Schwab, who apparently was dragged into the grave with the Pope, from what I've been parsing.
I heard he resigned from the World Economic Forum.
I like my thing more.
I just heard he died.
I reject your news and substitute. It came to me in a thought.
See, that's. I think I put that out in a tweet a while ago. I said when James, who was it? Adam Savage said on MythBusters, "I reject your reality," and I substitute it with my own. He's really just talking about modern liberalism.
Oh, you know what? Like, let's see if I got another couple things here that this one stuck out at me. So, get ready, everyone. Humanity does not suck resources from the earth like a straw in a milkshake until a gurgle tells it that the container is empty. Instead, as the most easily extracted supply of a resource becomes scarcer, the price rises, encouraging people to conserve it, get at the less accessible deposits, and find cheaper or more plentiful substitutes. Indeed, it's a fallacy to think that people, quote, need resources in the first place. So there's a few times I think we just need to repeat this. These are good just on their own. These sound like something that
these are very chud-like.
Guys from my community would say as like an ironic bit. It's a fallacy to believe that people, quote, need resources. They need ways of growing food, moving around, lighting their homes.
It's a fallacy to think that you need calories.
Like just having these notes and comparing them side by side is so great. I have to assume most people just didn't read the book, or maybe they did, but like people just kind of say, "Oh, this is a thing that says things are great." But has anyone fucking read this thing?
Nobody needs resources. Nobody needs oil. And
So-
it's also funny that it's this that whole thing is explicitly about oil, and it's like, well, we just covered that. And it's like, oh, you mean that resource that's this occultic blood of the demiurge in the Middle East? What?
Oh,
No
you mean
way.
the demon lubricant that
the demon lubricant for the solar anus? What? No
I don't
way.
hear holy space brought up in this at all, and that is a massive blind spot. What does Steven Pinker say on spinal catastrophism? What say
We
you?
need to know. We need to know.
What say you, Pinker?
Let's say you Pink. Actually, the one thing about that Pinker probably would be willing to address would probably be something along the lines of humanity is capable of thinking of its own extinction, and it's retarded because it doesn't do anything about it.
Oh man, I'm having so much fun just
Because this is what that was the end of Moynihan's book. He's like, well, we're so capable of thinking about our own extinction that we don't do anything about it. We should all just die. And that's why that book was just like really bad. Like the only thing I can call it is bad sex. Like there wasn't even an orgasm at the end of this. This was just bad. Like,
well, again, it's the most extreme form of nihilism. It's like accelerationist nihilism, which I never encountered before. It's acceleration in the sense that there's an inevitability to this momentum of progress of reaching the stars, but the end point is the absolute total destruction and reinvigorating destruction of the universe. So it's setting the end point as hell, but not only is hell inevitable, it is desirable, and you will embody hell.
But hell is not real to them.
Yeah, but they lack the language to describe it. But so it sounds demonic. It really does.
And again, this is why I thought this is so funny to kind of cover on Bright Monday. Is just that they can't help but it's that whole Yarvin bit about, like, you know, if you're like a Christian, like you're a Christian atheist, you're a Muslim atheist or whatever, like you're working with your priors. And Moynihan and Pinker, well, yes, Pinker's Jewish. He lives in the Western Christian world. Like, you know, he's calling it out. He's just like, listen, the Hebrew God and the Old Testament, terrible. That's not love, that's genocide. And I'm like, it's pretty much God's love. These people were evil. And then at the same time, he's all like, but really, the only way that we can find anything that's soteriological is if we just embrace turbo-libtardism and we all goon off into this beautiful destruction of our existence. Because as long as the line goes up, baby, that means we're on heaven on earth. And you don't know what that's worth. So be with me. Be enlightened. Be liberated by your own reason.
The more you talk about it, the worse it gets, too. That's what I love about this book. Can I just circle back to the thing you talking about? War is illegal, because I just want to give that a full reading. Yet the biggest single change in the international order is an idea we seldom appreciate today. War is illegal. For most of its history,
Give war a chance.
For most of its history, this was not the case. Which also, he makes it sound like at one point war was illegal in the past. Because he should have said the entirety of human history, war was not illegal. But he says most of the time, but well, when else was international war illegal? You madman. Might made right, war was the continuation of policy by other means, and to the victor went the spoils. Is that not true? You know, you and I are both neo-realists. You know, we're adherents of Mearsheimer, among many others. The theory of great power politics. So
yeah,
I don't.
The more I keep reading other people, the more I keep going back to Kenneth Waltz. But yes, go on.
Yeah, but it's like, is that wrong? Is it to the victor go the spoils? Well, what do you call?
Well, the historical precedent says yes.
We don't have that. Again, I just return to. I guess that's why we don't have war anymore. I guess that's why.
That's why the bad guys have lost every single war ever.
It's good that all the bad guys lost. I like living in a bad guy-less world. If one country felt it had been wronged by another, it could declare war, conquer some territory as compensation, and expect the annexation to be recognized by the rest of the world. I mean,
yeah.
Pinker, You had Israel back then. We've had Israel this entire time. What are you talking about? Like, again, this is obvious, right?
Territory would be annexed. Well, like, yeah, I mean, this was how like a lot of European wars were. There was an offense, something happened, they claimed territory, and they would plot to get it back when they had the might to do so. I mean, hello, Alsace-Lorraine, anybody? Like, going once, going twice. I'm asking questions. Like, wars happen for these reasons. And yeah, like, Victor went the spoils, and whoever got their ass handed to them got fucked over. Like, this is true. Oh, we don't do that anymore. Yeah, we do.
Do you want to hear a dumb, useless idea of how to fix the world? He says, here is Eisner's one-sentence summary of how to halve the homicide rate within 3 decades. They figured it out. They figured out how to get rid of half of all the homicides. What is it?
What is it?
Quote, an effective rule of law based on legitimate enforcement, victim protection, swift and fair adjudication, moderate punishment, and humane prisons is critical to sustainable reductions in lethal violence. The adjectives effective, legitimate, swift, fair, moderate, and humane differentiate his advice from the get tough on crime rhetoric favored by right-wing politicians. By the way, I don't think any right-wing politicians has actually said torture prisoners, but it sounds like, you know...
The closest we've gotten so far is that one California mayor who was like, give the homeless all the fent they want.
You could be mistaken for thinking the most liberal policies you've ever heard are right-wing schemes to just kill everyone they don't like. Like,
well, that one I think that everyone was saying that was a Republican mayor, and if so, I'm impressed. Not that I endorse like the mass killing of anything, but like, I mean, if that's your policy, man, I'm a little impressed that you were willing to be like, just give the homeless all the fent they want.
Well, that's
someone finally said it.
That's sort of the hidden purpose of accelerationism, I thought, which is that, okay, I'm convinced.
What did you think the vibe shift meant?
The vibe shift is, it's like, oh, I think, like, if you're a true accelerationist, you should be trans. Like, if this is stupid and it's going to destroy society, so I should want more people doing it so society collapses, right? But also, it's like, yeah, everyone should be trans and on fentanyl, right? Like, that is accelerationism. That's why I'm not really an accelerationist.
I'm an effective accelerationist. I'm for the effective distribution of fentanyl to the homeless.
It's like, I'm an accelerationist. Oh, you like the effective? No, I'm an evil accelerationist. I just want bad things to happen to everybody. So where are you on the quadrant? I'm on what's the most evil part? I'm just an evil guy. I had this big long come to Jesus. I'm
really inspired by Unit 731.
I had a come to Jesus moment. And Jesus said, you should...
Well, you see the timeline right now, and I just feel like I'm in a come town bit from 8 years ago.
Dime's giving the right too much credit. What does that mean? I don't. Which insane thing that I just said are we disagreeing with? That everyone should be trans and on fentanyl, or that we should just be an evil accelerationist? But yeah, anyway, just here's what they think. You can solve the crime problem. Crime is a problem in America, the land of plenty. What do we do about crime? Well, you know what? You need swift justice and fair courts, and you need to solve crime. Well, how do we solve crime?
That's racist.
Yeah, how do you solve crime? Well, you solve it is what you do. Gosh darn it!
Yeah, there's no gosh darn it. I wish I thought of that sooner.
Just dummy from Fargo. Well, gosh darn it! You gotta get in there. You gotta get your hands dirty.
You just gotta solve the crime problem. Don't you just know?
Okay, so how do we do it? How do we...
swift system of justice and a good kick in the pants.
You got to roll up your sleeves. You got to be willing to get your hands dirty. People don't work a full day anymore like they used to. And you got to...
All right, even in school for 5 days a week now. You got the block system in 4 days.
You got to people don't put their pants on one leg at a time anymore. Just a dumb bitch who doesn't know people put on pants. How do people put on pants these days?
Could you imagine just like I would love that idea of just like William H. Macy trying to get his money. He's just like, I'm an evil accelerationist. That's why I'm feeding this guy through the wood chipper.
I'm an evil accelerationist. I put my pants on inside out. What the fuck you talking about, Bezos? Bezos, what the fuck you do? You took too much Ambien. You took too much Ambien and you put your finger on the button. I think we would have gone halfway through this book, but believe me when I tell you, the audience, that it really just repeats itself. You can predict.
It really does. And you can read this in one sitting. That's what I did today to prep for this book. Was I read it during my lunch hour, and it went by so quickly because many of the arguments he made in the previous chapters are being relitigated in other chapters, cross-referencing and overlapping with one another, which is what you do when you're trying to make a cohesive and narrative argument for whatever it is you're trying to prove.
What's interesting is I think you could take this entire book, feed it into an LLM of some kind, because the book is written in an argumentative way. It's written to address you, the listener of this show right now. So
the chud.
Most of the book is him trying to imagine opposition to his position and answering it. So you would say, so just don't even read the book. Try and just come up with what you think Steven Pinker would say. So you'd say, well, Stephen, everyone's miserable now. And then the response, just picture it, would say, nah, they're not, or they're stupid. No. And I think crime has gone up. Well, that's because we haven't legalized crime yet. He says that in the book, by the way. He says that, well, drug crime's a problem, but I think we've seen success in legalizing drugs. And of course, he never advocates for it, but he says that could be something we could explore, and maybe we destroy the black market. So it's you could imagine that if you have any understanding of how these
are very Barack Obama ideas. He's just like, well, if we perpetuated alternative crop development, and if we were to talk about all the things that we need to do in order to fix the problem, then well, by gosh, you're just going to know that by doing it this way, we're actually going to solve the crisis. And it's like, well, no, you actually haven't told me how you're going to solve it, other than these platitude policy positions I hear every 2 years from Democrats. That's it. And like, I get it. You're lamenting the fact that in the moment you're writing this book, Donald Trump became president. I get it. You're angry, you're upset, you're hurt, you want to vent, you want someone to talk to make you feel good. That somehow, the world that you want can happen. And in fact, the people who might have voted for Donald Trump and thought differently about the world that they knew, well, actually, if we just show them this book, they'll know that the world is not so bad. But no one's going to believe you because you hate these people. Like, this is the thing about all of it that it boils down to for me that I always find irritating, is it's just like, you hate us. We know that you hate us. If you had it your way, it didn't matter what your liberal priors are. You would press the button that said exterminate every middle American chud on earth. Like, I get it. Like, that's your position. Just be honest. Don't tell me that your vision is going to be better. This is the thing I hear so many times from people that Dave the Distributist will argue with. He'll just be like, well, clearly we need to make the world a better place. And if we do it this way, then we're going to find the right policy, the right solution, and this is how we're going to do it. And they're trying to convince you that their side is actually better for you. And it's just like, well, on a root cause level, epistemologically speaking, you want me dead. There's no way I join a cause that advocates for my own disruption.
And also they do it in a feminine way. They'll never say, I want you dead, but if you died, I feel like that would be beneficial.
You would be remembered. No, I wouldn't. You would rejoice.
Because you want to talk about evil. I interpret this graph as evil based on the stats that we know, the facts and figures that we're all aware of. I don't need to litigate that right now, but this graph before us right now is U.S. hate crimes from 1996 to 2015. Of course, anti-black hate crimes are somehow ranked the highest. Anti-white is, of course, below anti-Jewish. And so this is so divorced from reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you define a hate crime? The FBI, I know for a fact, and I think everyone watching this knows precisely where he's cherry-picked the numbers, precisely where he's concocted this fucking broken line of horse shit in front of you. But why did he put this here? Just to express to you that white people have nothing to complain about. Also to say that violent crime has been going down, but of course, white people experience it the least, right? And I look at that and I say, if I accept that you are an educated man, an intelligent man, and I do, I can only interpret this as hostile to my existence. And I will treat you as such. I will treat you as someone who wants my dispossession, someone who, while not advocating for it because you are a faggot, you're a crusty old Jewish faggot, you won't say I should die, but you'll be like, if you died, maybe that'd be good. All I'm saying is I'm not saying. And that to me, like I said before, the patheticness of how they are approaching my destruction is more enraging. You could grant me the dignity of actually opposing me instead of just kind of celebrating when your best laid plans eventually dispossess me and act like it was the fucking universe doing it, that it was the tide of history washing me away. It can never be the machinations of any group. Groups don't exist. Only individuals exist. How can you have a conspiracy? How could you ever have a plan? Nothing exists. Things just happen, not because of God, but because of progress. Progress that they're on the side of. So if you are dispossessed by this motherfucker, that's just the universe telling you that your time has come. And that's him maybe explicitly or implicitly hiding his own hand in this. He can only say these things are good, not that he wants them. Just again, the sick patheticness of it is what really roused me up. Characteristically, we're ending this stream, and I'm whipped up into a lather.
As you should be. There are a couple of super chats I'm going to answer here real quick while we're talking about it. Screwed up Kalaminsky just sends $4.99. Thank you so much. He says, "May the spring rabbit another one, Seamus O'Blaine. He says, "May the spring rabbit deliver copious amounts of chocolate eggs and fun mugs during this possible time." I hope so. That would be nice. I've had an egregious amount of glorified cheesecake known as Posca cheese, and it's been really good. So I appreciate that nonetheless. Obadiah Vandal says, "Good evening, fellas. Great chat as always. You all kill it. If you're looking for a fun game, you might like Intravenous. Splinter Cell meets Hotline Miami with a Punisher-like protagonist." Well, that does sound interesting. So you have my attention there, good sir.
Oh, he's recommending Hotline Miami? Have you played
No,
that?
he's recommending a different game that's similar to Hotline Miami.
What's it called?
Although I've always found Hotline Miami to be somewhat trim-coated.
Probably.
I said it. No, he's recommending Intravenous 1 or 2.
Oh no, I played that. That's good. It's
I've heard good things about it.
But it's more like almost like the original Metal Gear. It's got more of a stealth mechanic, which is good or bad. Like it doesn't have the fast-paced nature of Hotline Miami, but I think you can do more in the game.
Works for me. No complaints there. But yeah, no, I think really the thing about this book for me is that, like, guys, the world isn't ending. Please look at this graph I've consulted with. And it's just, are there things about society that are getting better? That's the fundamental question. If I can say yes to some things, but I can't say yes to everything. On a macro scale, yes. But he will call you selfish, and he will call you stupid for saying, what about me? What about me? Clearly, my society's not, and this is the question that you see a lot of times when Fisted by Foucault brings up this. It's just Americans are talking about how things are not getting better, but also when it comes to American power abroad, things are great. And it's just okay, well, that's sort of the difference between, say, the comparison of empire versus the citizenry of that empire. If America is empire, it's not a very good one for the citizens of that country. And it's just I have to somehow or for some way accept that to be true. I don't think that that's particularly good for me. But hey, that's sort of the way we're dealing with this discussion, which is a little frustrating in its own right. But
well, you raised a good point there, which is the divergence between us and someone like Pinker is a complete different understanding of what the qualitative aspects of life. What is the good life? We define the good life in a completely alien way to how he defines it. We would see struggle, suffering as maybe not something to be desired, but something in reckoning with those things. We find something that is uniquely human. We find beauty in these sorts of struggles. He said the purpose of life is to exterminate struggle entirely. But I think that's something that we're pretty good at articulating on our side of whatever spectrum it is that we're on. That I think we have a firmer understanding of what the good life is, and I don't even think he's got the best understanding of what he thinks the good life would be. He speaks in very airy terms. He speaks in in vagaries, right? Just like, can't we agree that more is good? So like we're actually pretty specific on what makes the good life of a man in perhaps a family formation plus land plus living in balance with nature. You know, like we're very tactical about what we want, and they're not. And I think that's what makes them dangerous, because not long ago I read the Accelerationist manifesto that was created by, what is that guy's name? You know, the egghead guy. He follows all of us on X.
Yeah, I know. Mark
Andreessen. Yeah. He wrote this really silly manifesto that was like an extreme version of this, which is, like I had said before,
things are good actually.
If you're not excited about technological development, this is like the inverse of Nick Land, who says that technological.
And that's the funny thing, is that he likes Nick Land.
Which is, and I said that, I reviewed this on my paywall show, Real Secret Coffee Hours, and I said, I don't know how, he cites Nick Land in it, and I'm like, I don't know how you can read Nick Land and come away by saying, nothing human survives the future, and that's great, yippee, you know, like, or he's saying that we can reach the stars with our humanity. Nick Land prescribes the exact opposite. He's saying nothing human survives in the future, and that's inevitable, but we need to start reckoning with that now. Mark Andreessen says that no,
but what if that was good?
Yeah, and I'm like, and the way he describes it's very simple. It's very, you know, it's
well, like because it was a call for investment. That was all that it was.
But if I'm an investor, I'm reading that saying, "Oh, you're not serious. Like, what is it? You're a dummy." I know he's not stupid. Of course not.
No, it's you don't get that far in life by being stupid.
Of course, but I'm like, but I don't know an investor that looks at that and says, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, I would look at that and say, oh, this person's naive, but what is my money safe? Can I 10x with this guy who doesn't seem to see any downsides to what he's doing? To me, that's a risky landing place for capital. The guy who says, like, well, fuck, AI is just going to make infinity money in 5 years. That's inevitable. Well, it didn't. And there's probably a lot of angry investors right now saying, I expected this to 10x, and now I'm hemorrhaging money into this fucking shit. And
I was really excited I gave Elon money to help buy Twitter with X and everything like that. I didn't expect it to become an Indian welfare system.
Oh, by the way, I got another super chat here from Paladin YYX. Just tuned in. Wanted to say that thanks for all the great content. Fantastic work, guys. P.S. Prude is the best. I will not take that personally. I'll just say that's a nice thing to say. That's half of a nice thing to say.
So true. That's a nice thing to say. Thanks.
Someone's got a good point, Nokern. When forth comes the Judas and Geo stream? I mean, we have to set that up.
It's inevitable.
You want to talk spinal catastrophism? You want to talk something that can go catastrophically good or catastrophically bad. It's one of those two. But catastrophe is on the table. Because I'm the only guy that can get Judas onto a stream, really. He hates streaming. So putting Judas in the room with Geo, I'm talking myself into this, discussing the recent news about Kanye West. That's my dream.
Don't do that.
Do people like having bad times? I know I do.
Please, no.
All right, so we should probably get going. I have to get going. Unfortunately, we actually covered, believe it or not, the majority of the themes of the book, and I think we addressed the most important issues that I had with it. And I think the most important one is the history of the Enlightenment is more interesting than people like Steven Pinker and the advocates of the Enlightenment would lead you to believe. There's a lot of conflict. It's not one revolution. Just like any war, just like any development, it's a lot of skirmishes. There's a lot of interesting characters. Yeah, sir, continue.
This is why I really want to read. I know this is going to be a terrible, terrible read, but I really do want to read that book, the History of Western Decline. because
History of Western Decline. Which one's that?
He mentions it in the book here. Hold on. It is called specifically Western Decline. It should pop up in the Control F here. History of Western, something like that. I'm gonna have to go find it now.
As you're looking at that, I was going to call attention to a couple of comments. I like Record Deep, and it says, when you truly believe there's only one race, the human race, and you still manage to be a race traitor to all humanity.
So true. I wonder, what kind of... I wonder who that constitutes. There's only one race, the human race. What race is it?
Also have evil Sex Freakman, evil Nick Land be like, who's Nick Land? I'm Steven Pinker. I love that shit. This is the best comment section. We
really do have...
we all have the top freakazoids from each of our communities converging.
The Idea of Decline in Western History by Arthur Herman. I want to read that book because he's like, there are 2 centuries of doomsayers. And I'm just like, well, I kind of want to read his book and be like, well, were the doomsayers right? Because he's just like, well, people like Schmidt and Spengler and Malthus and Darwin. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm pretty sure that the Hour of Decision was right. I'm pretty sure Stoddard and Grant were right. I think the rising tide of color definitely happened. What else is next?
I'm looking at it right now. I got it up on screen. I think this is from Nazism to 60s counterculture, from Britain's Fabian socialists to Freud to Robert Bly and Madonna. This work examines the idea of decline in Western history. Okay, we should have a look at that one.
We should make that an episode.
There's so many good books, man.
I know this show could go on forever.
I like balancing out just the books of our opponents and then the ones that we actually like. Just to keep people sane.
We are doing Christianity and classical culture next, so everyone knows that we're not hurting you guys forever.
Absolutely. We love you. We care about you. This is a show of peace. It's a show of love. I wouldn't be doing it.
It's a show about one race, the human race. That just happens to be you guys in chat.
Everyone's a fucking moron, except the people in the chat right now.
What do I know? I'm just an idiot.
Humans are stupid. Gay machines are smart. Fucking.
I'm just saying the future's gonna be full of guys that, they got the suck off machine. Who needs a woman? What am I saying? I'm just an idiot.
Humans are stupid. Gay sex is Gay sex is smart.
Bill Burr talking about his black wife.
I was going to do a Bill Burr impression of that, but I don't think there's anything I could say that wouldn't get us demonetized. I don't think you can do a monetizable Bill Burr's wife joke. All right, we got to get going.
I tell her to calm down and smile. It's the only way I see her in the dark.
She's a very gummy lady, isn't she? She's a gummy broad.
Oh, what can I say? I like older women.
She is the worst looking black bitch on earth. I don't know.
Man casually forgets we had Michelle Obama's first lady for 8 years.
No, but Michelle Obama looks like she's a handsome lady. But fucking Bill Burr's wife.
What a handsome young man.
She's a strapping young woman.
I think this is the funniest thing I get. This is the last racist joke I'll make for the evening. I always found it funny when people were just like, it's so bad that Michelle Obama is secretly a man, and it's just like, no. You're letting your conspiracy brain get ahead of you. You're forgetting the most basic fact that most black women are very mannish and high testosterone. That's just a black woman.
But also, compared to Obama, I think that's what people are talking about. Like Michelle Obama, people say the linebacker, the highly developed traps on this woman, compared to Obama, who was very wiry, very feminine, working out with 5 pounds.
This is what happens when a down low brother, a twinkish man. So if you want to have a good time, chat, there's a 2003 article about down low black man. There is literally a guy they interview called Jigga with a J. Have fun with that, chat.
This is just gonna one-shot Geo's mind.
just there's one last super chat I have here from Aramaic Discourse. He says, "That's a nice tomb you've got there. Be a shame if someone rose from it. Happy belated Easter, nerds." Well, thank you too, Aramaic Discourse. Christ is risen.
Yes. Also, I'd say one commenter many episodes ago, or in our community, called me a scandal upon the Catholic faith, and I think conducting this episode on this day within the proximity to Easter and the death of the Pope, it continues on that legacy.
I'm not Catholic, so I wouldn't know.
I'm not Catholic. I know nothing about that, says Prude. Prude's in the fucking streets. You don't know nothing about that. Anyway, we're going to get going now. Thank you. I think we got all the super chats and all the ranked non-super chats. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time. I had a phenomenal